And so everybody that's coming in on the show, just fire away the questions. And in the latter half of the show, we're going to get to, and we're going to do the 53-man. But first off, Dan, Keith, Bryce, what's up? What's going on? How you guys doing?
Just trying to recover from the highest scoring Seahawks preseason game in 7 years from last night. That was fun.
Yeah, recover. That's the right word. Because there was some really good stuff that went on there, and there was some stuff that was harder to watch.
Yeah, let's touch on some of the good stuff real quick. I'm just gonna touch on the offense. Obviously, the starters come out, they play a quarter. Geno Smith, DK, JSN, all on display, and it felt like it was like out of the gate quick, and then they were on the sidelines. DK's got a helmet off, 7-0. Was that a little preview of what's to come, or are we getting a little too excited there with that grub down the field offense there? Dan, what are you thinking?
Well, it was kind of funny because you guys probably saw this too. Brian Baldinger did one of his little breakdowns, his little old school low tech screen shares, and showed the fade to JSN and then the touchdown pass, and said, this is what you can expect to see out of this wide open spread Ryan Grubb offense. And then shortly thereafter, our friend Griffin Sturgeon of the Seattle Overload podcast retweeted it and said, this is a concept that they've been running for a long time. And, so let's pump the brakes on that. But what I do think we can take away from that drive in particular, and also we saw some of this with Sam Howell at the helm too, is I do think, and based on his history, we're going to see a more aggressive offensive approach. There will be more of a concerted effort to get the ball downfield and put pressure on the defense instead of, just sort of acquiescing to the defense sometimes if they think that the matchup's not there. That we saw that too often, I think, in recent years, where they would almost just kind of default to the defense. Well, it's just not there, so let's not force it. Where I think we see this time and time again from the good offenses in the league and some of the elite quarterbacks is you have to keep defenses on their heels, and you have to keep them honest. You have to take shots, especially when you have playmakers like the Seahawks do. So I do think that's a fair takeaway.
Well, and I think one of the things you need to add to that is the fact that on like JSN's, fade, he was covered. He was covered well. It didn't matter. DK was covered. It didn't matter. So like if you got playmakers that can do that, you're gonna be more aggressive because you can be, and you don't need a guy wide open in order to throw the ball down the field.
And it was especially good to see that from Geno, given that he hasn't played, and you would expect him to maybe be just a touch hesitant. We saw it on the first throw; it just kind of looked rusty. He sailed it a little bit. The timing wasn't there, but to be able to be as decisive as he was and make those two throws to guys that as you said, Keith, weren't wide open. That's something we haven't seen in the past from some of our other quarterbacks, even the really good ones. So it was refreshing.
Hey, Bryce, I know you were at the game too, but real quick, posing to you too. I mean, wasn't that one of the things we've talked about all season? If he's off season, if he's 1-on-1, 1v1, throw him the football. And they talked about how, they got him that point. And then all of a sudden 1v1, Geno throws it like Keith just mentioned, wasn't open, but he's the more physical guy. He's got to go up and make that catch, man. What are you thinking?
The things that I liked about that opening drive were, and this is something that I've had a big gripe with probably since DK year 2 he's been here, is they have never focused on getting him the ball early in games. That first throw, even though it was outside and there were some Seahawks fans sitting around me, they're like, oh yeah, typical Geno, like misses. It's like, it wasn't the easiest throw to make. Like, he's trying to layer that in a corner that's basically in cover 2 sitting in the flat, and the safety's kind of going over top. The ball wasn't that poorly thrown. Like, yeah, it was a little high, it was a little outside, but that's your first throw in a game since last season when we played our last game versus Arizona for Geno. But the fact that, like, JSN involved quick and early, DK's getting a target right away. Like, I listened to a podcast that Tom Brady did. I think he was on Colin Cowherd's show, and he said, like, when we had top playmakers, we get them the ball early. Like, you cannot ask that dude to keep running his routes and not get him a ball until late in the second quarter, or even sometimes with DK, it was like, oh, is DK even playing? It's the third quarter of the game, and we're finally targeting him.
Yeah.
Those are the things, like Keith alluded to, get your playmakers the ball one-on-one and let them go make plays. DK's touchdown was purely a well-thrown ball by Gino and DK going and making a play. And when people talk about the DK fade, oh, throw him the ball, that's the DK fade, not the 2 yard off the line and let him go get it. That's not something he excels at. Let him run 20 yards into the end zone and go up and get a ball. That's where he's more effective. And man, like, you're going to add Tyler to this offense and Noah Fant to this offense. But like, the biggest thing that I noticed watching last night was the formation variety Ryan Grubb puts out there and how simple he makes the reads for the quarterbacks. Like, it's not, I watched Gino do it in his first drive. I watched Sam Howell do it. It's like they get that back foot in the ground and the ball's coming out. They already kind of have an idea where it's going and it's quick. There's no hesitation on, oh, do I do this or do I do that? And like for a guy like even Sam Howell, one of his biggest critics has been the fact that he's poor in decision-making. Sam Howell in the preseason games has looked a lot better in his decision-making. And I think a lot of that goes to Ryan Grubb and I can't remember the quarterback coach, London, and Jake Peetz's scheme and how they're coaching him up have made Sam Howell look like a upgrade over Drew Lock.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat. I may be getting the tenths of a second wrong, but essentially that every throw except for the one where the pocket was compromised and Gino had to maneuver a little bit and flip it to McIntosh was the ball was out in less than 2.5 seconds, and that was as evidenced by after the game, Mike McDonald said the plan was to give Gino 2 drives, but we saw what we needed to see.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. They came out and they're like, okay, we're going to get these guys. We're going to run the offense, and they ran 5 plays and all of them were pass plays. That's not them running the offense. That's getting guys reps.
That's getting Gino rep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly what that was.
Yeah, that was very, there was an intention there. And then, and I'd forgotten this because sometimes when you're in the stadium, I mentioned this on my reaction last night, your reality is a little bit skewed. Because there was one play in particular where McIntosh got another carry, but it was called back by penalty. And so I had forgotten that until I watched the condensed replay again when I got home last night, that the 56-yard touchdown run by McIntosh was the first rush of the game for the Seahawks offense. So it seemed very intentional that they wanted to work on the timing in the pass offense, but also maybe just not show very much on film about this, varied running attack that I think Ryan Grubb is going to unleash in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and also to to piggyback off that, no Kenneth Walker, no Charbonnet. So and we've obviously Kenny Mack's been on display all preseason. He got involved, obviously, like you just mentioned, that little Gino getting out of the pocket, fighting for his life, and there's Kenny Mack just sitting there. So and still almost got a first down out of that. So we'll talk about the 53 man, but obviously a lot of nice things out of Kenny Mack this preseason, just the way he's running the football. So it's exciting. And anything, as far as, we talked off air before we came on about the coverage, a lot of guys open, obviously some of these guys aren't going to play, but any concerns, coming out of this game on the defensive side, Keith?
Well, the answer to a couple of the concerns that I had, you had in the second week, you had like DJ James didn't look like he knew how to tackle. And he came out in this game and made some great open field tackles one-on-one. And so I felt a lot better about that from him. And some of that stuff, but really there was just a lot of communication that wasn't happening on the back end. Once you got into the second, third string guys, once it was like Tyakota, I thought had a good game, but his presence when he comes in was kind of when we started to see some of the communication stuff break down. So he might still be playing, but not talking. And but young guys like that, I mean, it takes some time for them. They've got to learn how to handle that. So yeah, I mean, there were some coverage breakdowns, but I wasn't overly concerned just because of who it was. And these aren't our starters. And if some of these guys may play, but it's not going to be all of them. It's going to be like, okay, somebody comes in because somebody, gets hurt and has to rotate out. But you've got one guy out there. Everyone else will be the starters that are talking. So I'm not as concerned as I probably would normally be for giving up that many points.
Yeah, we talked off air before we went live about how there were a couple plays in particular where Kobe Bryant just seemed a little late to react. And keep in mind that this is really his first season playing safety full time. And all of us like his upside there, and that, agree that that's a better fit than outside corner in the league. But that, in particular, I saw a lot of blowback on Twitter last night about Nehemiah Pritchett's coverage ability, and in particular the long touchdown to Thrash, that he was in coverage. But we all agree that when you see the replays, especially from up top, that Bryant misdiagnosed that play. And so, yeah, that's the thing that stood out. Those young guys just weren't on the same page. I do take away a couple of things from that, though, or add some context to it. Seahawks were only rushing 4. I think pretty exclusively the entire night. And so they weren't, and even with that, they were getting some push on the pocket at times, but the secondary was having to cover quite a bit. And then the other part of that would be that after the game, Reek Woolen doubled down again on something he's been saying all throughout the preseason, that he was asked a question about his man technique and how he's been working on it. And he said, because we're going to play a lot of man. Like, he reiterated that. And I think maybe early in the season, if Coach McDonald is concerned about some of those communication issues and that they're not quite, in sync enough to be able to play some of those more complex zone concepts, maybe they'll lean into that man coverage a little bit, at least early in the season. With other guys too. We're talking Reek and Witherspoon, But I'm so glad, I wanted to mention this too. Sorry that I'm glad you brought up DJ James, because one of my favorite takeaways from last night's game is not just him, both those Auburn kids, both of them. They were in coverage on a couple of completions. That's going to be expected from young corners, but both those guys had, I could do a cut up of probably 7 or 8 total plays between the two of them where they're coming up and making really physical run stops on the edge in space, the hardest tackles to make. In one of them, James blew up a screen where he had to shed a couple of blocks. Pritchett did a similar thing. They actually gave James, I think, credit for a sack on one play on the quarterback where he did that. Those guys showed me something last night. And especially coming off, the last couple of years when none of our guys could tackle, that was really, really refreshing to see. And that's how those guys are going to make the team.
Yeah. And it was especially refreshing to see that because of the fact they didn't make those plays a week ago.
Right.
So James really struggled in the second preseason game with tackling. He just whiffed on a couple, had bounced off, ball carriers, and it was really kind of ugly. And at that point I was like, okay, this guy's probably headed to the practice squad. But you watch what he did in this last game and hit that physical nature and his ability to come up, take on a block, and still make a tackle. That's how you make a team, especially with Michael Jackson being traded and Artie Burns possibly being out with a knee injury. So those guys are going to be probably both on the roster.
Yeah, and it's especially impressive considering neither of them are bigger dudes. Like, they're both pretty lightly built. And no, that was fun. That was one of my notes from last night.
One of the things for me that I took away, I guess we wouldn't call it a negative, but obviously the injuries, Chenna's dirty chop block from Teller there that hopefully is not too significant. The thing for me, though, was offensive tackles outside of our two guys basically being George Fant right now and Charles Cross really worry me, because Fant isn't exactly, injury proof. He's had his fair share of those over his career. I really think there's going to have to be a play in here at some point for, a potential trade to get another veteran tackle in here, because McClendon Curtis cannot play tackle, right or left. That was the one thing that came out last night to me. Stone Forsythe looked a little bit better on the right side, but not much, where I think, and we'll get into our projections here shortly, but I don't know if he makes this roster and you don't try and sneak him through to the practice squad as one of your veteran guys and maybe get him through because of the mass that is this waiver claim period. Mike Jarrell looked good again for when he did play later on in that game. He still looked good, but he's developmental, right? I couldn't trust if somehow George Fant went down for a week or two that we can put Mike Jarrell out there and he'll hold up. The tackle position almost concerns me more in the lack of depth there than the interior of our offensive line, which is kind of a reverse from where it's been for the last little bit of time here, where we've been worried about our depth there. And man, I know, Dan, you and me talked about it before we went into our seats, but if Abe Lucas plays another snap for the Seahawks, it's a bonus at this point. Like I have like just no faith that this guy is going to be able to get on the field. Like he's walking around with no limp, but what's the deal? What is really the holdup here? Is it actually what Pete said it was, and a chronic injury?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are reports that I didn't notice him on the sideline, but that he seems in good spirits for whatever's that worth. He's down there and he's involved and take that for what it, with a grain of salt, I guess. But I did find it interesting, to your point last night, that they flip-flopped those tackles and played. We've seen Forsyth play right tackle. He did it some last year when Lucas got hurt, but that they moved Curtis and gave him some reps at left tackle too, which I thought was really strange. I mean, he's certainly got the length, and he can be a dominant presence in the run game. I mean, if that's all you're going to do, I guess he can play tackle, but he got beat again badly. I don't know the player's name on one play last night, just by quickness on the edge, because he just couldn't get out there and mirror the guy. And I didn't have Forsyth in my projection a few days ago, but I almost think at this point you have to keep him, because he is a guy that's had reps and he's played both tackles. And, George Fance had some injury issues. They've really treated him with kid gloves in the preseason. I'd feel better about Stone Forsyth having to play either tackle spot than I would McClendon Curtis right now. I think Curtis makes the team because he can play anywhere, but I think Forsyth does too. And they're just going to have to figure out maybe a way. Maybe they have to keep 10 offensive linemen, whereas sometimes they've gone with 9.
Well, see, one of the things that Bill and I talked about with this was because he's really high on Gerald, and there was one point he had I think after the first 2 preseason games he had 26 pass blocking snaps and gave up 0 pressures, but he's doing all of that like in the fourth quarter against guys that probably won't be in the NFL. Once roster cut downs are done. So basically it's like, tamp the expectations a little bit. The kid's got physical skills, but yeah, he's a developmental project. If he's your 4th tackle, okay, but going into a season with him as your 3rd is just asking for problems.
You might have to put him on the roster though. A young, physically athletically gifted guys like him that have that much upside get claimed. It's how the Seahawks got Raekwon O'Neal and McClendon Curtis last year at the cutdown. Like those guys get claimed and stashed on teams that have bigger needs. I kind of think they're going to have to figure out a way to keep him.
I think they keep him. I think you already kind of mentioned it, like with Forsyth making the team, and then Gerald being the 4th. McClendon Curtis has value because he's also a backup guard. And that is one of those things that you're going to look at and you're going to like, okay, we can, he's going to probably make the team too, as a backup guard. So there's that.
Because here's another scenario too. I don't think there's any question Laken Tomlinson's going to be the left guard against Denver. They love him. He's one of the leaders. He's the guy that got the team together pregame yesterday and kind of got the chant going and all of that. And he has, when he's been out there this preseason, he's looked good. He's looked better than he did in New York. But at some point, if Anthony Bradford hangs onto that right guard spot, Christian Haynes is going to push and get that left guard spot. He's looked that good there. If and when that happens, do you keep Laken Tomlinson even on the roster at $3.5 million a year, right? So that it may just be a matter of time before that move with Tomlinson, happens, and unless obviously continues to play at a high level. Just a thought.
Yeah, and going back to your thoughts about Abe, spirits high. That's what they actually showed him. You saw him on TV watching the game too, and yeah, he was out there laughing. But again, it's like the thing that scares us. I know you and Bryce had that combo too. It's just there hasn't been any change in updates. Usually, you're talking about, we think Abe's your best offensive lineman on the team. You think you'd be getting some more detailed updates. And I think at this point, you're a week out. We all know he's going on PUP list, but it's like you said, if he plays a snap, you're just like, wow, this is bonus. So and that scares you, especially going in thinking, this guy was going to be healthy at some point. He still can be, but, again, then, I think we'll have this discussion, but it's, do you start looking at the future beyond Abe?
Yeah.
That could be some questions, coming up in the near future, right?
Let me say this. always the sorry, just real quick. Always the eternal optimist here, right? And even though Bryce, you and I talked about maybe never seeing him again last night, I've been thinking about this quite a bit this morning. There were a lot of reports heading into training camp that he was going to be good to go at the beginning of the season and not have to be on the PUP list. Corbin Smith reported that from some inside sources. And so there's obviously been a setback in the timeline. They're not giving us any details. That's just kind of their MO. We're seeing that from McDonald. He's a lot less forthcoming and optimistic than Carroll was. And sometimes to Carroll's detriment, because we would have expectations that ended up being unrealistic. So the fact that Lucas isn't ready yet, it's been set back a little bit. However, he's not going, they're not flying him off to see other specialists, having him rechecked, right? You see that a lot of times with injuries like this, where it's not coming along the way they expect it to. And then that's usually bad news. Oh, he has to have another procedure. They're not doing that. And so, until we get other news, I do think there is reason for optimism that, after the 4 weeks, maybe we'll see him at some point this season. Otherwise, we may, if he's a month behind their timeline that they thought he was going to be on the practice field, but they're not sending him off to see other surgeons or specialists, I can only take that as some sort of good news.
I don't know if he's a month behind where they had, because it was never he's going to be ready for the preseason. He's going to be ready for week 1, we hope. Right? It was always that week 1 was always kind of the that was kind of the goal. And I agree. I think there's been a setback, because if he was truly going to be ready for week 1, he would have come in and started practicing kind of Connor Williams style, right? Where they'd be working him up at this point, and they're not.
Yeah.
But once he hits that setback, he's not going to be ready for week 1. He's probably not going to be ready for week 2. At that point, I think the decision was made. Hey, we're just going to send him to the PUP, which means he's not going to practice, because if he practices, then he's got to go to IR, and there's a whole, thing with the roster as far as getting him on the active roster for 24 hours before you can ship him over there. Otherwise, he can't come back. We know we're going to send him to the PUP, so we're not going to push it. We're going to give him a whole nother month to get right and get in shape and all of that kind of stuff before we have to try and get him on the field. And I think they're just playing it cautiously because they're in a position where they can.
And if that's their approach, then I'm okay with that, because I think it was obvious that he came back too soon last year. Even though when he did hit the field again, you could see the improvement in the offensive line, but he was clearly not 100%. It was kind of painful to watch. And maybe it even did more damage to the knee having him out there. So if their approach this time is, look, this is a long-term investment. This is a kid that we want to get 100% healthy so he can still be part of our long-term future. Let's do that. I'm all for that, even if there's some struggles in the meantime. What's the deadline for, I'm trying to look that up here, for when they have to declare PUP for the beginning of the season?
It's cut down time, Tuesday. Same as
it is.
Yep, same as all the other cuts and everything. It's
okay, yeah.
You can only be
Eastern
PUP.
time.
Yeah, you can only be PUP if you are on the off-season PUP list, which basically means you have not practiced. Because as soon as you practice, then you're not eligible for that, and then it becomes an IR situation.
Then I believe, right? Yeah.
Yep. So,
that's one of the things I kind of was worried about with Jerome Baker is he's practiced, but he hasn't played. He would have been actually, in theory, almost a prime candidate for a PUP spot at this rate, because he's never really been out there. He gets out and then something else is lingering that's an issue. So
yeah, he's one of those guys that I would look, he's probably going to make the 53-man roster on Tuesday, but by Wednesday he may be on IR.
Yeah.
And doing that, just all that does is makes them eligible to return. If you just put him straight onto IR without doing the roster shuffle, then you're done. So yeah.
But you can also just leave him on the regular season PUP for 4 games, right? And avoid IR, or is it?
For Lucas, you can. For Lucas, you can, but not for Baker. And in fact, the PUP list, you can leave him on there. I believe it's 15 weeks now. You have.
Yeah, it is 15 weeks, you're right.
And that may apply.
6, so.
Yeah, that may apply to Artie Burns too, depending on what this injury is, or even Rayshon Jenkins. Well, not Jenkins, but specifically with Burns, where they may have to. He may get cut, Tuesday, right? And people might think that that's a bad move because he's been a solid player, but he's probably not going to get claimed on waivers as a vested veteran and also a guy that's hurt, and then you can bring him back after that.
Yeah. Just a quick shout to Dave S for a super thanks. Great discussion this morning, gentlemen. So yeah, we're just getting into it, Dave. We appreciate that.
Dave's the best.
Dave is great. So that's awesome. We're gonna dial up the 53 man here in a few minutes. Bryce, I know you're gonna dial that awesome software that you got up there. We're gonna go through 53 man. This is Bryce and I talked about this on a couple of pods, leading up to this, that there's gonna be some hard cuts that these guys have. You look how deep a lot of these rooms are. Corners, you just mentioned Artie Burns. It feels like one of those years where there's gonna be a lot of tough decisions. We're gonna get into the 53 man here because we can keep going on about it, but even running backs, you keep 4, and if you don't, can you slide Halani on the practice squad because you probably can't with Kenny, and it's just gonna be so many decisions. How many times where you're watching all preseason to your backup backs just going at it, playing great. Stuff like that. It just seems like I can't remember the last time where we've had this many hard decisions on cut day. Dan, what do you think?
No, I think it speaks to the depth of the roster and the young talent in particular at, some of it at positions of, that are desired. I said this a couple of days ago, these cuts aren't always about the 53 best players. And that's what some fans forget. And there's going to be some overreaction between now and Tuesday to some of the names that are announced. But keep in mind that I think John Fraley posted a graph earlier today on this from Field Goals about how really on a percentage basis, very few players are claimed on this mass cut now, since there's only one. And teams tend to want to keep their own developmental players that are familiar with the organization. They're familiar with them. It happens, but it's not widespread. And so John Schneider's probably as good as anyone in the league at having his finger on the pulse and knowing kind of which guys they may be able to sneak through and which guys they can't. And McDonald sort of hinted last night when asked about how hard this day was going to be that, they have to keep their eye on the big picture and it's about being developmental. And so that's why I've had a lot of people, maybe you guys have too, tell me that DJ James should be cut because they've seen a couple bad reps on tape and Artie Burns is better. Well, as I've already mentioned, Burns is going to make it through waivers.
Yeah.
And plus he's a vested veteran, so keep him on the roster. You have to guarantee his,
especially now that he's hurt, he's going to,
But James isn't, a young corner that was projected by some as a 3rd or 4th round grade. We get in the 5th. There's no way that guy makes it through waivers to your practice squad. It's not that simple. So some of the 53 is about protecting your core and the guys you want to move forward with. And then there's a lot of shuffling after that, because I think we've seen it in the last week with the 2 trades. This isn't going to be anything like 2010, 2011, but I think Schneider's out there maybe more so than the last few years aggressively, and his staff looking at waiver wires and looking for guys that fit what McDonald wants to do, fit this defense. Maybe you get a kind of a sneaky little gem on the offensive line. They're going to be looking, and maybe now more than ever, if Nwosu's out for any length of time, they may be looking for an edge player. Certainly they're looking for another defensive tackle that can play more inside and a nose tackle. Brady Henderson has talked about that a lot this week. So I think there could be more changes between now and a week from now than we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, and you made a good point there about it's about protecting guys and that kind of stuff. One of the things that when Bill and I do, we do roster projections and stuff throughout the offseason, and you look at Cody White has had a tremendous camp. I know he had that big touchdown that was called back. He hasn't really shown up in the preseason quite as much, but in camp he's looked really, really good. But he's a guy that can get through to the practice squad. He may have earned himself a roster spot with his with his play and having a good camp, but that doesn't mean he gets it, because he can get to the practice squad where Derek Young or D. Eskridge probably can't. Those guys are much more likely to be claimed.
And we know this because Cody White's made it through waivers about 20 times already in his career in this league. So, it's when we get the roster up, it'll be interesting to talk about the receiver position, because I think that might be the most intriguing.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of that, I will throw that up actually, Dan, now that you've asked for it.
By the way, I'm drinking Georgetown Johnny Utah Pale Ale today. A little bit lighter. Going a little lighter today.
Nice.
Is that a local
Yeah.
that a local brew
Yeah,
there?
it's Seattle. Georgetown's actually kind of the name of a neighborhood or a little business
Right.
district in Seattle. Not too far from the stadium district, actually. It kind of neighbors Sodo. And Georgetown's probably my favorite Seattle brewery, top to bottom. I don't think I've ever tasted a beer from them that I didn't like.
Right.
Back when I was managing bars, they were probably the best people to work with too. So shout out to Mark Marzano from Georgetown Brewery.
Nice, Bryce.
Okay,
what do you real quick, Bryce? What do you got going real quick before we get
me? I'm drinking a tequila kind of. I don't know if you call it a soda drink. It's 7% alcohol with tequila and lime in it. So I went the hard stuff to start this, and then I'll slowly ease into probably some whiskey before the end of the night.
Wow, ease into whiskey. Okay.
Oh yeah, I ease into things. I start with something and then ease into my whiskey. So at that point,
hopefully you can stay. Hopefully you can stay.
This will be great. This will be awesome. I'm trying to rival what Keith did on their last roundtable. So
and here I thought Canadians only drank 5% beer.
Oh no, I'm the 7% guy, and if it's not 7%,
yeah, Dan, the brewery game's huge up here. It's huge. I mean, the craft brew game is it's blowing up. So you can get all the way up to your 9 or 10% beers.
That's
up here.
true.
But yeah,
all right.
Okay, guys, let's kick this off, Bryce.
So this is the Seattle Seahawks roster simulation done by the German Seahawkers. So these guys do a great job with it. It's very intuitive. It's nice because we can add guys, go through it, and then go back. So our roster's not totally set once we move on from a position. So we'll start on the offensive side. I think it's pretty safe to say we know who the quarterbacks are for this team. It's PJ Walker is our starter, and Sam Howell is the backup. And we're cutting Gino. Just for everyone out there, that's what we all
cap
think.
Space, baby, cap space.
Oh yeah, cap space to the max. So
hey, here's a question I have for you guys about a quarterback, though. I do feel like this regime and this coaching staff now, unlike what we saw a lot under Pete Carroll, places a little more value on a third quarterback, albeit he's not going to be on the 53. He'll be on the practice squad. Do you think they're out looking for an upgrade over PJ Walker when guys are cut?
I do.
Yeah, I do. And they're looking for a younger guy. And an upgrade, because Walker has shown throughout the preseason he's not the guy. Yeah. Like, you can go and you're looking at a practice squad guy that probably won't play at all, and if he does, it won't be until later in the season, so you have time to bring him along. They're going to go get a guy with more talent. They're going to get a guy that has more promise.
Because there aren't many teams. Seahawks are one of the only teams in the league that carry only 3 quarterbacks during the preseason. Like, a lot of them have 4 and 5, and we saw it last night. Like one or two of those guys, like the Browns are shopping those guys, and they all had their moments. I mean, I don't think they're trading Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think he's a guy they want to develop. But I think certainly Tyler Huntley might be available. They're going to have to cut some of those guys. Yeah, some of these teams have 4 or 5 guys in camp.
I think Tyler Huntley's the guy. The other guy, I know. I would like here.
Donald knows Huntley.
If he gets cut, would be great. Is Jake Haener from New Orleans? He has familiarity with Ryan Grubb's system. He has talent, and he's a young guy you could develop. And with Spencer Rattler down there,
did you see what Rattler did today?
Yeah, exactly my point.
Played him.
You know what? Is it crazy to think? And I'll throw this out. I know it's a little off the Seahawks, but could Minnesota turn around and go to New Orleans and call about Derek Carr?
I think they feel good enough about Sam Darnold. I think Kevin O'Connell likes Sam Darnold a lot
for now. But if you have the talent, which Minnesota's got a pretty good roster, like, you could call about Derek Carr, I think, in New Orleans, and I think New Orleans would listen because of his cap hit, because of what you've seen from Rattler. If things don't start the first,
if they go 1-5 out of the gate, I could maybe see something like that. Sure.
Yeah. All right. So we picked Gino and Sam. I think we're all in agreement of that. If anyone wants PJ Walker on this roster, I don't know what to say about that, but we'll move to the receiver position. I'll put our main guys we know are making this the top 4. So DK, Tyler, JSN, Jake Bobo. Now, what is the agreement on how many receivers we're keeping? And just so you know, D. Williams is listed as a receiver on this, but we know he's a corner and a returner.
He's a corner, yeah.
So we can keep him till the end when we start building this all out and decide if he makes it as a corner. I think Laviska Chenault's the 5th. I think he's locked a spot.
I think
I
he's
think
a
that's
lock.
done. That's absolutely done. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they ultimately end up with 6 on game days, but I don't know that they'll start with 6 on the 53. They may have to protect another position. And I think all the rest of the guys on this list are pretty safe to get through to the practice squad. I mean, maybe a team sees some upside in Derek Young, but you look around the league and for the most part, teams all have 8 or 9, receivers on their rosters right now. They have their guys that they like. They're in the system already. I don't know that. Do any of us think Young presents enough upside that another team is going to go out and give him a 53-man roster spot to protect? I don't know. But even if you try that and you lose him, is it a big deal? Because we've seen what Aesop Winston has done, and we like Cody White. So I tend to think that by Tuesday, there's only going to be 5 on the initial 53.
So you got D. Eskridge getting cut.
I do. It's hard because last night was so dynamic and we finally got to see it. And you saw how his teammates felt about him. I just look at his usage. It seemed like they really want D. Williams to be the main returner. And there are some people out there, Corbin Smith's one of them, who thinks he has a 53-man roster spot, even though that's all he does. I haven't seen enough from him in the passing game yet to think that that's a role that they see for him, unless they just think he's that guy as a returner and that he presents more value than Williams would.
I've never had D. Eskridge on this upcoming roster until last night when he broke that. And now you have to look and go, just the way his teammates reacted for him. Like they love him. And it would be hard to have him have that moment, that success, and then turn around and tell all those guys that were like, there for him and pounding the table for him that, he didn't make it.
If this was the previous regime and everything happened the same way, I would say, because there was an investment there in him, but I don't think anyone has that free pass this year. So I don't know. I'm rooting for the kid. I know there's people that want to give up on him because of the injury history and the off-field incident that he had, but let's not talk about Creed Humphrey. Okay. But I like this kid. I liked this kid coming out of the Senior Bowl. I hated that we took him instead of Humphrey, but I didn't hate him as a pick, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen him as who's the running back out of Notre Dame that could never stay healthy?
Pro-size.
Yes. Pro-size. I never saw Eskridge as that kind of guy. I just kind of thought he got nicked up and had some bad luck. I always saw the potential there.
I think you can sneak.
We lost you, Bryce.
So since Bryce
he's thinking about
since Bryce is frozen. Did you guys see the thing somebody
I don't see enough
on Twitter that
was from D. Eskridge to warrant. Oh, we having issues here.
You were frozen.
Having issues.
Sorry, anyway, so the thing on Twitter that was it was like career punt returns for a touchdown. D. Eskridge 1, Creed Humphrey 0.
Creed Humphrey 0. We won that draft. That was a great stat of the day.
If I gotta ask you this: if went 6, is Derek on there for user 6? Like if they do go 6, is that because you heard about Mike raving about him too?
That's why I was going to say maybe, because Mike said some things about him last night.
Maybe he's a talented big body receiver, right? That's where I'm looking at. Like when I look at Aesop, to me, it's like, he's been around here before, but also the fact that, he's a smaller guy. We have 2 smaller receivers, obviously with more talent, right? JSN Tyler this on the smaller end, where Derek's this big physical, DK size, not this, nobody's like DK, but just he's a bigger dude, right? And he brings a lot of that skill set too, which is nice. And obviously what Mike said, right? That obviously you guys heard about. So
yeah, McDonald plays things close to the vest, but I was surprised when I watched that post-game presser that how definitive he was about how he felt about Young. That kind of said something. Whereas you compare and contrast that with his comments about Jamie Sheriff, right? Which all the 12s want him on the roster, especially with Nwosu being banged up. Like if you don't even have to read between the lines. Like McDonald essentially came out last night and said, proud of the kid. He should be proud, but he ain't making this roster. We're hoping he gets to the practice squad. Like he may as well have just come out and said that. So that's why what he said about Young last night gave me pause.
Well, the thing is that what Young does is it's not just his, what he offers to the offense, but he is a special team standout as a guy that covers punts and covers kicks and does that. I mean, he's got 4.4 speed and he's 6'2", 220. You just don't find that size speed combination very often. It was to the point where the previous coaching staff had packages for him built where he was going to be a fullback and an H-back, and they were going to move him around and try and get him on the field. And then, of course, he got hurt in camp and all of that got thrown out the window. But, if the sixth guy makes the team, I'm almost certain it's Drake Young.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Sorry, guys, that was a tech issue. But yeah, Derek Young's the one I was going to say out of that group that I think makes it as a 6, just because how Mike McDonald has talked about him. Right? And
Bryce, also, Bryce, I got to ask you this too. I mean, don't you think too, just that how we, when you look at Aesop, I know you like him and stuff like that, but, we already had those smaller kind of guys, like Tyler's a small receiver, JSN's a smaller, obviously these guys present a lot more talent. So if you're going to take a 6. I mean, without Mike's comments, if you just look at him as a receiver, if you think that's why he'll be it. But I like like Keith mentioned, you don't find guys with 4.4 that big, that physical.
You don't. And the special teams factor with Derek Young, like he's a great gunner. Like he'll run down and cover, and he gives you some of that as your 6th guy. That's what you want. You want a guy that you can plug into a special team spot if you need to. The thing, though, that was really interesting for me, and it has been kind of through this whole offseason, training camp, preseason, is how little Tyler Lockett has actually done. Like, it has really kind of stood out to me. Like, yeah, he went through warm-ups. Apparently, he's dealing with some sort of leg issue. I noticed his sleeve's been back on his leg at practices and stuff when he's out there, when he is doing stuff. Like, it's really screaming to me that this is probably Tyler's last year, plus his cap hit next year for Seattle. Like, he won't be on the roster next year. So yeah, I think if you do take a 6, it's Derek Young, just because he gives you some versatility in the offensive receiving core. If Tyler does miss time, JSN rolls into Tyler's spot. Bobo's now your 3rd. Chenault gives you a little bit of a different, and then Derek gives you a little bit of something different. So it gives you more variety. But right now, we'll just go with the 5. If we have still some numbers, we can come back and put Derek Young in. So now we'll move over to running back. Now, are we taking 3 or 4 running backs, guys? Because I'll put the 2 on that we know are making this roster.
How healthy is Charbonnet? That's the question.
That's a good question.
Because if he is, they just held him out, for precautionary reasons, and he's going to be fine. The 3 is an option, but if he's banged up and possibly going to miss week 1, they'll keep 4. They'll just have him on the roster and have him ready.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting and a little disappointing that nobody asked McDonald point blank about Charbonnet last night, because they were throwing all these injury questions at him, and he was answering them pretty straightforward. On my roster projection 5 days ago, I had him keeping only 3, but after last night, I think you have to keep 4. I mean, you can't. I don't think George Lalonde. First of all, Kenny McIntosh has absolutely established himself as the 3rd guy. Like, my concerns about what they were saying about him in pass protection is what led me to wonder if maybe Helani had gotten the edge on him. But when you see how they used him, even in situational stuff in those joint practices against the Titans, let you know where he was on the depth chart, but also just last night solidified it. And he's just such a talented runner. But then you also saw it from Helani. I don't think Helani makes it through waivers. I think that he was going to get drafted if it wasn't for the injury issues at Boise State, and he showed everything. When you draft or sign prospects out of college, what you want to see is the skills that they present on tape in college carry over to the league. And on that one run that got him to the 1 before they gave it to him to finish off the drive, he showed off everything that his scouting report raves about. I mean, physicality, vision, lateral ability, quickness, strength, physicality. I think they love him. I think there's a reason they targeted him in undrafted free agency, and I think they keep 4. And which is, now this gets tricky, right? And this is why maybe they only keep 5 receivers to start, because if you keep keeping that extra guy because we like him, you have to rob Peter to pay Paul at some point. right?
Mhm.
No, that's fair. So we're gonna go with 4 here: George Filani and Kenny McIntosh.
Yeah.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll, we may, when it's all said and done, have to go back and rethink this. But shout out to the guys at 12 Talk, because they sent this to me and I never dove into it the way that you are, and now I'm kicking myself for it. This is a beautiful tool.
That's awesome.
It's phenomenal. I absolutely love it. It's great. It allows you to kind of play and match make and do what you want. So, okay, tight end. So
I would pay for this, and you can tell the guys that if they're watching now, send me an invoice. I'll pay for it.
Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown, I think is going to be ready by week 1. At least his videos that he's posted, he's moving now. The swelling seems to have gone down in his foot.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance Pharaoh Brown's on the roster. Whether he plays a bunch in week 1 is kind of up in the air. So are we now? AJ Barner and Brady Russell. I don't see a way Barner's not on here. Kind of what you were talking about with the corners earlier there, Dan, about James and Pritchett. He was the youngest guy at his position in the draft. And if you cut him, he's gone. Nobody's going to let him sneak through the waivers.
Not the way he's shown. Yeah, not the way he's shown to be in the blocking game. And that's the thing. Pharaoh Brown's on a 1-year deal, and Barner
he's your future blocker.
He may have some limitations in the passing game. He's not a dynamic athlete, but he's so good, and he's shown it even at his age already in line, that I think he's your Pharaoh Brown next year and moving forward. Got to protect him.
Yeah.
Now,
Brady Russell made. How could he?
No.
If you cut Brady Russell after everything he's done, I mean, the dude has shown up every day at camp. He's shown up in all 3 preseason games. Like, if you cut him, like, how do you go into a locker room and tell the guys, look at the guys there and be like, he didn't do enough.
It's really funny you say that, though, Keith, because it gives me flashbacks, if that were to happen, of Case and Williams.
Oh God. Yeah.
But Williams was a guy that was just so limited athletically, but he made a bunch of plays. I know he made a bunch of 50-50 balls, and
but you remember how the team responded, though. There were guys that came out, Sherman and other guys, going, how did he not make our roster? And we kept so and so over top. And he's talking about, how did Pete Carroll walk back in? And I think that might have been part of the decay at that point, or starting to decay more, because that was post the Super Bowl loss. Yeah, you had that, and it just truly started to erode at that. Always compete, give that guy a chance. So I agree, Brady Russell's made this, and the other reason I think Brady Russell's unique in this is because of this guy's injury. Brady Russell gives a lot to Ryan Grubb that Jack Westover gave him at UW. His versatility to play a little bit in the slot, block, do kind of the H-back role. So I think Brady Russell makes it, and I think actually Jack Westover gets snuck through to practice squad, or maybe he gets an injury settlement depending on what the severity of his injury is, but I think he probably makes it on the practice squad as your new Tyler Mayberry type tight end, because I don't think Mayberry makes it going this year into the practice squad.
I think Brady Russell's, plain and simple, one of the biggest stories of the preseason. I really do. And he's not. I expected him to contribute in the passing game. That's what I liked, what I saw on tape when they got him early last year. Another guy that they poached off a practice squad after the initial cuts. But I didn't expect him to be the all-around tight end that he is. He's a solid blocker too, and we've seen it in the run game even. He's one of the stories of camp to me. It's a really cool way, and it just speaks to how many different ways you build a roster. When you look at guys like him and Curtis, and O'Neill's not going to make the roster, but he was a guy that, that was acquired in the same way, and Drake Thomas, where you comb through these waiver wires and you find guys that you can poach if you can give them a roster spot. And what a revelation he's been.
Okay, so now we're on to the O-line. So I'm going to click through the guys that we are almost certain are going to be no matter what on this O-line, just to speed this up. So Bradford, Connor Williams, Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, Lincoln Tomlinson, Christian Haynes, Olu, and George Fant. There we go. Okay, so I'm counting Abe on this. When we get back, and probably come back to this later, he's going to be on PUP. We all agree on that. He's not going to be playing the first 4 games potentially. Like he said, it was a hope he's ready for week 1. We kind of think it's probably not going to be that case.
Yeah.
So one guy I want to kind of bring up that I've been very impressed with And I think because of Connor Williams' situation, there's no guarantee he even starts game 1, even though they're hoping he's ramped up in time. He's coming off an injury. I like Jalen Sundell as a center tackle flexibility initially to make it, because I don't know, like, you can go off PFF and he's had some really good grades, but he's a guy that I think could be a developmental project at center if Olu doesn't work out, because he also shares similar scores. We talk about RAS scores to Connor Williams. They're almost identical. I've really been impressed with him.
No one's gonna poach him. He can get to the practice squad. That would be my thoughts on him. I'm looking at this going, who do we know can't get through?
Okay, so guys I don't think can get through. I think Mike Jarrell, someone would potentially poach him, actually, is one guy because of his skill set and where he's tested as a tackle.
Yeah.
So I'll put Mike Jarrell on. Now, you got Lamea, who is a fourth or fifth round pick. And a lot of teams seem to have liked him coming out.
Fifth rounder. Yeah.
Fifth rounder, Forsyth. I like Greenfield, but I think you can sneak him through the practice squad and McClendon Curtis.
We talked a little bit about this before we went live. I think Curtis is a lock because A, how they feel about him and what they've said about him, and B, that he can play guard and tackle. And we all agree that he's better as a guard, but he can play all 4 non-center spots, either side. Even if we didn't really get an explanation of this last night, but they flipped him over and had Forsyth playing right tackle and Curtis playing left. So I think he's on the roster. And the guy that I've changed my mind about is Forsyth. I thought he was expendable because of all this young depth, but I think he's a guy that until you know about Abe Lucas, given the fact that George Fant is 32 and they've had to hold him out of a bunch of practices already this preseason to try to preserve him, that you need to, I trust Stone Forsyth more than I trust these other guys if we had to go to another starter. And what if something happens to Charles Cross? Yeah. Forsyth is a natural left tackle. He would be my preferred choice on the left side, unless you had someone, unless maybe now, if you want to get really far-fetched, maybe George Fant can play left tackle. And if Mike Jarrell at some point is ready to play, then that could be another option. But that's a stretch. I think you keep both Curtis and Forsyth. And if that gives you 10, that may seem a little high. However,
that'd be 11 actually.
Would that be 11, including Lucas?
Lucas is out.
I'm not including him.
Because Lucas doesn't count against the roster if he's on the pup. You don't even have to do the 24-hour thing. So
if it gives you 10, that gives you 25 on offense, which is an even split. Now, teams don't necessarily do that. You may keep more on defense and offense, but I think 10, given all the questions, makes sense. And Lamea, I like, but I'm not worried about him getting through waivers. He hasn't really shown a lot of good reps. But he's also a guy. I think he's a 4-man for McClendon Curtis. Yeah.
Lamea should have been being their developmental center. They should have moved him to center and had him working out there from day one. He has the full profile of a legit center. And I have been kind of disappointed that they haven't even tried him there. He's just been a guard.
It's the only position he hasn't played, so at some point you might as well try him there. That leads me to another point, though, that I don't think we've talked much about. What if long-term Anthony Bradford grabs that right guard spot and holds on to it? Because he seems to get better every week. I thought he had some good pass pro reps last night, and he's a mauler in the run game. I've seen him block 2 guys on one play. I've seen him block guys with one arm. He's so strong. And let's say a guy like Lamea or McClendon Curtis, who has played some left guard also, they've played him on both sides, ends up being the long-term guy there. I know I'm getting ahead of myself. Christian Haynes played center at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
And there was some
that can play center.
There was some thought coming out of Connecticut he could be a better center than guard, and some teams may view him as that. I'm just saying long-term, if Connor Williams has a good season, goes and prices himself out of your salary cap this offseason as a free agent, that could be another option.
And then, but my only caveat to that, Dan, is then who's our left guard for the future? Because Lincoln Tomlinson is not.
Well, that's what I'm saying. One of the other guys like Curtis or Lamea would have to convince them. That would have to be part of this.
The thing for me with Lamea, and this is the only kind of caveat I have with him, is I think a lot of teams were high on him, and I don't think he'll make it to the practice squad. I think even though he hasn't put much up, I think someone will just take that kind of risk on a 5th round guy. The other thing is we talk about Mike McDonald's kind of eye for linebackers, right? And his ability to take Tyrese Knight. If you listen to Scott Huff, and when he talks about LeMaya, he wanted LeMaya at UW. Like, you can hear it in that kind of video that the Seahawks always put out. And he's like, I finally got you. I can't wait to have you and work with you. Like, I think he was Scott Huff's like kind of pick. Like, he really wanted him. So that's why I wonder if he doesn't make it. We'll go without him for right now, but I wonder if LeMaya is kind of that wild card if he doesn't make it over like someone else that we kind of think should be there, but they want to go with the younger piece because of these reasons of Scott Huff's.
Well, and I'll say one last thing on this position group. If between now and Tuesday, they don't keep Jarrell and or Forsyth, that could tip their hand about their optimism with Abe Lucas.
True.
Right? If they think, okay, starts season on the pup, but he's going to be ready by week 5 or 6. So we can try to get by this early part of the schedule, which is a little bit more favorable, and protect one of these young guys that we want for the future. To McDonald's comment last night, right? That could give us a little bit of a hint. But if they keep both those guys, if they do this, like we're talking about, that probably doesn't bode well for Lucas playing in the first half of the season.
And so for our listeners and viewers, Lucas is sitting up here because we're counting him on the pup list at this point during roster construction. All right, so now let's head over to the defensive side. Okay, so linebackers are all bunched into one, edge and inside. So let's start with our edge guys. So Chenna, Derek Hall, Boy Mafe are the 3 main guys. Draymond Jones has been playing some reps there in practice and whatnot. Mike Morris has taken reps on the outside there as well. Do we see Jamie Sheriff or one of these other guys, Nelson Caesar, Anderson, making this roster? I don't see any of them making it. Like, I know Jamie Sheriff's had a really good preseason, but he's been playing against 3s and 4s.
When they traded Darryl Taylor, and then I saw Sheriff play last night, I thought, well, maybe that's the call. And then McDonald got up to the podium and talked about him, and I'm like, yeah, he's cut.
He essentially, what he did in his press conference was basically just give him a big pat on the back.
Hey, good job, buddy.
And an orange slice. He was like, excellent. We'll see you hopefully. Now, he could, if he gets through the practice squad, and you would think he would. He was a street free agent 3 weeks ago. He's working for Southern Wine and Beverage in Georgia, I think. That speaks usually to lack of demand from teams all around the league. Those opinions can change based on the reps he's put on tape, but you put him on the practice squad, he can be a game day elevation for as long as Nwosu's out. So, I mean, they can do things like that and sort of you almost buy yourself an extra roster spot. But based on those comments, I don't think he makes the team.
So these are the 3 edges I'll say, and we're counting when we put in on the D-line. Morris and Draymond will also get reps at those spots.
Yeah.
So Tyrell Dotson, Jerome Baker for inside, and Tyrese Knight. I think, and I'm going to put this out here, because of watching that game and when the second group came on the field, who was wearing the green dot with Tyrese Knight, which I found kind of rather interesting, was Drake Thomas.
Yeah, I did find that interesting.
You pointed that out to me, yeah.
Because I did not expect that, because John Radigan had the green dot in the first preseason game, and I think he had it with the second unit in the second preseason game. I was a little surprised that it was Thomas and not like Patrick O'Connell. But yeah, that is interesting. It's very interesting.
And the fact for me is that he ran the first set of second team. Like, when the first defense came out and they went to that second group, Drake Thomas was out there before Radigan or O'Connell, which I was like, really? Like, because I was trying to figure out who the hell's 42. I was like,
right,
who's 42? I don't remember, because I haven't seen him for so long. I was like, and I'm like looking, and I finally, I'm like, that's Drake Thomas. What in the? I'm like, I didn't even know he was playing tonight for one. So I think Drake Thomas might have endeared himself somehow to this coaching staff in a way that we're not aware of, because we haven't seen him. But for a guy that basically just came off of the pup list 2 weeks ago, just before the Titans joint practices.
Yeah.
To now, hey, you're the second linebacker with the green dot of all things, not a guy that's been there the entire camp and practicing. I think Drake Thomas makes this 53 for whatever reason, his special teams versatility. And the other thing for me is his coverage. He is good in coverage as a coverage linebacker with Dotson and that style, that I think maybe that's what they like about him. And the Raiders were not happy to lose him last year when we poached him off of their practice squad.
He's such an interesting case because, I loved when we got him from the Raiders last year. He was a really under the radar guy that I liked coming out in the draft. I just loved his run fits and his discipline and his eyes. And he's an undersized guy, though. He's an undersized Mike. And then he had that knee injury late in the year, and we never got any clarification on it. It was just a mystery. Even Corbin Smith said he couldn't get any information. He thought maybe it was a patella tendon injury, and those take longer. And then all of a sudden, he was back on the practice field with no warning. No one had ever asked McDonald about him or anything. And then he was out there with the green dot last night. Here's where I've come to land on this inside linebacker situation. Thomas, to me, is a little redundant physically and style-wise with Terrell Dodson. I think the acquisition of Michael Barrett this week makes Thomas expendable. I think they're also an undersized guy, a little bit of a similar skill set, but I think a guy with a higher ceiling, and he just didn't get here in time. He played some reps on special teams last night, which is kind of cool. He was out there leading the way on D. Eskridge's punt return touchdown, right?
Yep.
But Barrett's a guy that, we've talked about a little bit yesterday. We all like. I think he's on the 53, and maybe Thomas is the fifth guy, but I kind of think Radigan's out. The fact he had the green dot taken away from him, the fact that Barrett is known as a special teams demon in addition to what he can do on the field, and that was kind of Radigan's role. The fact that Radigan would be a $3.5 million cap hit if he's on this roster, that you can save a couple million by cutting him. You would still get him back on the practice squad. I don't think there's any chance you would lose him to another organization. I know they like him, but that's kind of where I'm leaning now, is that Barrett's on this roster. They acquired him for a reason, and that Radigan might be out and Thomas might be a wild card if they keep 5.
So I look at it this way. I think if it comes down to it, I agree. I think Barrett's in. I think their fifth guy is Thomas, because I think Thomas gives you more than O'Connell or Radigan with his physical skill set, his ability to also play specials like we saw last year. I think he's a higher upside than both O'Connell and Radigan, and he's your fifth guy.
So if we put, we want to put Barrett on there, but Barrett's not in this software. How do we account for him?
So what we'll do is
Thomas in there.
We'll be 52.
Him, yeah. Or sure.
Put Daryl Taylor in there since he's not on the
roster.
roster.
Daryl Taylor.
Throw Daryl Taylor. Throw Daryl Taylor in there.
To play on 2 teams.
Yeah, I'll put.
I agree. I would agree with you about Radigan, though. I think the biggest thing is the money.
I was shocked to see him not play until basically the fourth quarter last night.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't play much, and he didn't have a green dot, and both of those things are like, clearly the coaches have not seen something that they needed to see. He's never been the most athletic guy, and he's one of those guys that comes downhill and makes tackles, but isn't great in coverage. Very much a Pete Carroll linebacker, not a Mike McDonald linebacker. And so, it kind of makes sense that he would end up kind of falling out of favor.
I'll say one more thing, though. Like, before we move on, it's, I think there's a case to be made for O'Connell ahead of Drake Thomas too. Like
he plays good.
He just continues to show that he's a better athlete than you expect. Yeah, he's undersized, but how often are we going to continue to say that? Like, that's just kind of the trend now in inside linebackers in the league. He had led the team in tackles last night with 9, even though he didn't play in the first half. That's what he did last preseason. He's around the ball.
Well, when he stuffed that run too, that was.
Yeah,
that was all pro. I mean, that was a nice play. So
I don't think he makes it, but I think they're crossing their fingers and their toes, hoping he makes it through to the practice squad.
Eric Gilbertson says Jamie Sheriff is this year's Bobo more Sheriff. I mean, like you said, Dan, you sort of touched on that. Everybody around you guys love this guy. I mean, obviously he had a big game, but like you said, it's probably not going to make this squad. But obviously, if to Eric's point, bit of a fan favorite, just like Bobo is now, and obviously made the squad. But yeah, he's the kind of a guy you sort of can't help but root for, right?
Yeah.
I think Sheriff makes it through to the practice squad, but I put Anderson in here, and that's our Michael Barrett, just so everyone knows. He's sitting in there right below Drake Thomas. So I think that's kind of where we go. So let's move over to corners. Okay, so here we go. And also, Keith, I apologize. The way that this is set up, the comment goes right over your camera, so I'm so sorry that you kind of get blocked out there.
I don't care.
He's cool.
So Devin Witherspoon, Reek Wolin, and Trey Brown are the three that I think are guaranteed to make this group. Now we go to our conversation. DJ James and Pritchett, are they on the 53 initially?
Nehemiah Pritchett is. I don't think that is in. I don't think that's something that we need to debate. Like, he's been kind of that guy. I think DJ James has been up and down, and there's some talk. There's a conversation to be had there, but Pritchett's always been the better of the two.
Right.
Okay, Kobe Bryant's list is a corner, but he is strictly a safety. We know that. So he'll be added in this group, but he'll count in the safety, so we may have less safeties over here. Artie Burns, we figure, could have been, if he was healthy, cut, re-signed week 2 potentially, so his cap hit doesn't count, like if he's cut later on in the season. I think Lance Boykin, I think he's a practice squad guy. He shows some things, and then he obviously had the bonehead decision last night. The other one that I wonder goes in this group, he's listed as a receiver, is D. Williams.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was the number 1 kick returner last night, basically, and punt returner. Like, they had him out there for everything with the starting groups. He also does, and this is the one thing I mentioned this to Dan before our game, the game that we were at. He gives you some receiver versatility too, as a spot guy in a pinch if you needed to put in a receiver, because he's played the position in college. So you kind of get a 2-for-1 there with D. Williams, where if you bring him in as a corner and a specialist in the return game, and say, I don't know, Laviska Shenault gets hurt or something, he can always flip over to that receiver position for a game if you need him to.
Williams is a guy that I've just had a hard time buying on the 53, but there's so many people out there that cover the team that are convinced that the team is almost committed to him in a way to be the returner, that maybe we need to think about the roster a little bit differently with these new kickoff rules. That when you look at the specialists, and you have Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, and Chris Stoll, maybe just, you have a 4 spot there and not worry so much about how he impacts the other position groups. He's your return guy. He has shown some cool things in coverage, right? Mm-hmm. But even though mostly on the outside, like if he could play slot, and you would think at his size he would project to that, then maybe that would impact the James decision. The James thing is interesting to me because of this. He did play some outside in college, but I don't think that's his spot here. If we were sure that Devin Witherspoon was going to primarily play in the slot, then I would say maybe James is expendable. They could risk trying to pass him through waivers. When you're thinking about the future, right? If you want to have a slot guy. But Witherspoon played exclusively outside last night. And I know it was only for a couple of series. But we don't know what the plan is with him yet. And so I do think Artie Burns at some point is on the 53, whether it's initially or it's a little bit later. So as much as I hate the idea of potentially exposing James, he's probably a replaceable player. And maybe they do feel strongly enough about Williams' return ability that they just have to protect him somehow.
Okay. So are we going to leave Burns and James both off this right now, and then just add Williams in the receiver bracket, but he goes under corner to give us 5?
That gives us 5. I think one way or another, they keep 5.
Yeah.
I think they keep 5 that can play the position. So I think either Burns or James is on the roster, one way or the other.
Keith, who are you going for? Vote here.
It's not going to be Artie Burns. I might have been until he got hurt, and that was a non-contact injury, which scares me. I'm thinking he may end up on IR, which would make it DJ James. But the D Williams part makes it hard. It really does, because he has shown some nice things in coverage, and he's a special. He's there to be special teams, but he's also played well in coverage. So, yeah, he makes it harder.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd say DJ James. I put Kobe Bryant in because he's going to be in the safety conversation, and I think he's probably going to be. He's your number 2 free right now currently. So, safety wise, Julian Love, Rayshon Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace. Now, Jarek Reed, have we heard anything? Because he didn't dress or nothing. Is he still a pup, basically?
He's still pup. He's still pup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's still on the pup. So really it becomes your Kobe Bryant fits into here as your 4th.
Mhm.
I think Marquise Blair, you can sneak through to practice squad as one of your veteran practice squad guys.
Easily.
Ty Okada is the one that's kind of interesting to me. He's played well, but I don't know if he warrants a 53-man spot.
I don't think he makes it.
Yeah, I think he can get through to the practice squad.
Yeah. So this is basically our safety room. Kobe Bryant counts in here. Okay, so now this is D line. So I will put everyone that we know is going to be on this D line: Murphy, Williams, Draymond, Jaron Reed, John Hankins, and Mike Morris. Okay. Cameron Young's still on pup because for whatever reason, there's something going on there with him. And I wonder if he maybe, depending if they sign a D tackle in this waiver period, that's a guy that could potentially play, like not like, oh, we're signing a project guy, like a guy that can come in and take some meaningful snaps with Hankins in there. I wonder if Cameron Young doesn't end up on, like what Keith said, like season end IR, just to protect him going forward. That's what I'm starting to think. That's because he's been, they haven't said a peep about him since Mike McDonald came and said, oh, yeah, he's about a week away. And then we haven't heard a single peep about him.
Right.
So, one guy. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say none of those other undrafted guys have really stood out. But Miles Adams, especially against the Titans, played the entire game. He's had his moments, but he played mostly on the interior. Mostly played nose against the Titans because they just didn't have anyone else, and was surprisingly good. Now he's nicked up. I think he gets claimed if you waive him. I think he's on the roster for now, but they go out. I think they acquire another defensive tackle in the next 4 or 5 days, and maybe Adams is the guy that's expendable.
Okay. So do we put Adams on for now, I guess?
Yeah, but it's going to be someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like that's what I would do. They're going to acquire someone else. Brady
so what
Henderson.
I'll do this then. I'll just throw one of these guys on as a gap player.
Kind of a placeholder. Yeah.
Yeah, placeholder.
Okay, what does that do for our numbers so far?
We're at 49 out of 53 right now, but we still have.
You got to do
We have
kicker.
3 specialists.
Yeah.
So that
3
leaves
specialists
us
and
one
then
spot.
Leaves us one spot.
Oh.
and that leaves us
The
probably
one
D
spot
Williams.
is D Williams.
So you take him.
And then now that's again.
So we got 5 receivers.
That's with 5 receivers.
That's with 5 receivers. So so that means
you can always elevate
up.
somebody. Yeah, you can always elevate someone from the practice squad. And I think a bunch of those guys, if not all of them, maybe Tariq Young gets claimed. But I
still think Tariq makes this 53. I mean, that's just me. Like when the real 53 comes
He
out,
might.
I think you're going to see his name on there. So I mean,
But if he does,
I think on injuries, I think it depends on what happens with Chenna. If he goes to short-term IR,
well, if he doesn't, for sure. But I think if he doesn't, I don't know. I just think. I mean, yeah. Do they carry 6? Or, do you guys think they only carry 5 receivers?
I don't know. I find it interesting that I think we tend to agree on just about everything. I think this entire 53-man roster comes down to one spot that we're not sure of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's D Williams.
I mean, there's you got to look at this. I mean, if Pharaoh Brown ends up on short-term IR with his foot, then Tariq Young, I think, is the next guy guy on at wide receiver, or that kind of stuff. Or if they do something a little different on the offensive line than we're expecting, and they keep 9 instead of 10. And they let a guy like Stone Forsythe go because they're okay with McLennan Curtis backing up both sides. Then you that's another way to get Jerick Young onto this roster. One of those type of situations could easily happen, and he's really, in my mind, looking at all of this, he's the 54th guy on a 53-man roster, which makes it hard because I think he's good enough to make this roster. I think he should be on this roster, but things have not broken his way in terms of, the tight end injuries and the offensive line stuff, and it's those kind of things make it harder on, guys at the back end of the roster to hold on to their spot.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say too is keeping 5 right now the way that it is, basically D Williams is a corner in this. Ryan Grubb's offense uses a lot of tight ends split out. Like Noah Fant's going to be more of a receiving threat than he truly is a tight end. Tight end is what we've known to see them in Seattle's offense with Waldron and Brian Schottenheimer. Like, I think you're going to see Noah Fant's target and receptions increase this year compared to the last few years. So when they go to 4 receiver set, it might be DK, Tyler, JSN, and Noah Fant. Or if they go to 5 receiver, you're throwing Bobo out there and Noah Fant. Like, it's not a true 5 receiver set. Like, I think that's one thing we got to look at too with what, Grubb's done at Fresno State and at Washington. Like, Culp and Westover were in a lot of those offensive sets split out in some shape or form at Washington. And so he uses his tight ends a lot in the receiving game, more than what we've seen in the past where they just run flats and outs and corners. Like, he uses them to attack the middle of the field. So I think that's where Fant, Farrell Brown, if he's healthy, even AJ Barner are going to be kind of used and Brady Russell in those situations. So, all right, this is our 53. I'm okay with this. If this is what Seattle came out with, I'm actually okay with it.
We've really only got them needing to go out and look for one person, and it's a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
We've got 52 of the 53 are currently in camp, and they need to go find a defensive tackle. And I think most people would agree that they need to go find a defensive tackle. When Gotel got hurt and landed on IR, it left them without a backup nose. And Cameron Young never got healthy. Gotel's now gone. They had 3 coming into camp, they thought. Currently, they've got 1, and they need to go find one. So makes a lot of sense.
If they strike out, I have seen some speculation that the Gotel injury might not have been that significant, and that when he's healthy, kind of like we saw last year with a couple of guys like Jonathan Sutherland, that as soon as they get healthy, they could bring him back again if they like him. But yeah, Brady Henderson suggested John Ridgway may be available from the Commanders. And I think that's the type of guy they're going to look for. There's been a lot of speculation. I've seen a lot of articles written about who the guy might be. And there's a lot of like older veterans, like Mike Purcell was cut by the New England Patriots the other day, but he's a veteran nose tackle. He's been reliable, but he's on the wrong side of 30. I don't think that's the profile they're looking for. I think they're going to try to find a younger guy with upside that can fill that spot, but give him just a little bit more youth and maybe maybe just a little higher ceiling, something to look forward to in the future. Ridgway certainly fits that bill. 25 years old, but there might just be a little roster crunch there and a scheme fit issue.
So I will make sure to send this to you guys so you have it. But yeah, that was our roster kind of breakdown for everyone. So yeah, that's kind of the first half of this.
By the way, just to give an update, just got a notification from the Seahawks that they, as far as Uchenna Nwosu goes, a couple of things today. First of all, is it David Chow, the Pro Football Doc on Twitter?
Yes.
Very reliable. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He literally is currently he'll tweet out pictures of ACL surgeries he's doing and things like that. And he's built quite a following on Twitter by being able to evaluate video and really accurately assess what he thinks injuries are. And he reported today that he thinks it's likely that Nwosu sprained his MCL, which in an optimistic scenario would be 2 to 4 weeks. Sometimes it can be more like 4 to 6. But 2 to 4, they wouldn't have to put him on IR, to Keith's point, because 2 weeks are left in preseason and you just figure out a way to keep him on the roster and you elevate somebody else. But the Seahawks just sent out a notification that they aren't going to know for sure anything new until tomorrow at the earliest. So we may have to kind of sit on pins and needles again for the next 24 to 48 hours to find out.
Yeah.
How Uchenna's looking.
That's tough. Yeah, sprained MCL, like you said, optimism 2 weeks. I mean, that can be still a nagging tough
When you
injury.
watch that play, it could have been so much worse. I mean, there's
For
people
Mhm.
freaking out
sure.
on
Oh,
Twitter
for
right
sure.
now, and I'm like,
Well,
this
for
is
sure.
good news.
And
Yeah.
well, yeah, of course, but obviously we wanted we were looking so forward to him being ready to go with the
Oh,
week 1 here in the season. So like you said, of course it could have been worse, but it's just like, oh no, that's not who we think it is going down again, right? Like you said, people holding their breath because obviously when he went out last year, now obviously we have some more depth and stuff like that, but when he went out, it sure changed the way we were looking, and especially guys like Mafe and being effective there. So here's one from Sean asking us, is there a chance? Is there a chance? People obviously optimistic that the Hawks have a legitimate chance to win the NFC West. He does. Obviously, I think there's still they might have closed the gap a little bit with this roster and the way things are looking, but I definitely don't think they're the favorites. You obviously still got to have the Niners there with their fronts, and the Rams are a great team. I think we're a lot closer. I think we're going to be close to the Rams. I mean, what do you guys think?
Rams are having a bunch of injury issues right now, especially in their offensive line, which I thought was going to be a strength of theirs.
And then they just told, what was his name, Ernest
Jones,
linebacker.
Yeah.
Jones.
Right.
Yeah, they said go find yourself a trade, because they're not going to be able to figure out the contract thing, and they're just like, we're done. And so I mean, that's a huge loss to their defense.
I do want to catch up on a couple of things because I didn't realize with the multiple stream here that comments were going to be coming through on my side. So our good friend Chris Clough, Seahawks author, he's written a couple of books. He used to cover the team, and still has a tremendous blog called Seahawk Talk. Friend of the show, friend of your show. He chimed in a little bit earlier that let's see if I can't put it up on the screen here.
Which one?
He's got a few here. You talking?
He said, he talks about inside linebacker first.
Yeah, here it is. Here's a linebacker one. Yeah. So, Dan, what's your take on this? We're thin. He thinks it's embarrassing.
He's right. We need to find out about Jerome Baker. Like we haven't seen him on the field. He returned to practice last week, but it was a walkthrough when he showed back up again. There's a couple of things we need to see this week, and this is worthy of a discussion. We need to see, there's 3-4 guys that need to be on the field. And one of them is Jerome Baker. Now, I feel a little bit better about this position because I think Tyrese Knight has been much better this preseason than we all expected him to be so early. I think he's been really good. He was out there last night again. I mean, he gets that when he gets to the football, he gets there with a purpose. And I think we haven't seen any coverage busts or seeing him just guessing wrong or being out of position. He's been really, really solid. Terrell Dodson had a couple incredible, like elite level coverage reps on tape last night. And we've also seen him make some plays on the ball in the run game. So I'm a little bit higher on it than Chris is. It's just very unproven. Absolutely. And then he has another comment about nose tackles, which is they are hard to find. They are hard to find because not many teams use true nose tackles anymore. And so the ones that are out there who are kind of, let's say, 320 plus and can really stuff the run on early downs and maybe give you a little bit more than that, maybe a little juice in the pass game, or, if they're young, they're not getting released. And if they're older, they're available for a reason. And those skills tend to decline a little bit quicker.
Real quick on Knight. I think for me too, I think, because it's Mike McDonald, and he's played great. He's looked great. So in the preseason, but that gives you that extra boost of confidence, knowing that sort of Mike sort of, was sort of maybe the behind this pick, and his reputation of developing linebackers that maybe we were missing something here when his name first got announced in the draft there.
So what do you guys think with the fact that every time he goes to praise Tyrese Knight, he he had a good game, but man, we need to see more from him in coverage.
Right.
We need to see. It's like he can't praise him without also critiquing him. Like I find that to be very interesting because he's not like that with anyone else.
He's kind of like that with Byron Murphy a little bit. I kind of think it speaks to how much he likes him and how important he is, that okay, this guy has all the traits we're looking for, but we need to make sure that he stays on track, because I think it's because he's paying a little bit extra attention to him, because he said similar things about Murphy. It's almost like he has to hold himself back from praising him too much, because he wants to make sure he stays on the straight and narrow, and he just keeps focused and lets these guys. It's easier to be a little bit more blasé or even dismissive when talking about other prospects if you're not as emotionally invested in them, right? Like what he said about Sheriff, right?
Yeah.
Like he likes him. He likes him, and he may very well figure into some things that we do and play some important reps this year, but he doesn't see him as an important part of the future.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too. If you'd be more worried if Mike's not picking apart these guys a little bit. To your point, Dan, like they're at the end of the day, they're rookies. They haven't even played a snap in the regular season yet. So yeah, looking good, but this, and this. To your point, he has high expectations for Knight. Obviously, Byron Murphy, that speaks for itself. First round pick at 16. This guy is supposed to be a can't miss. So he's going to be talking about him a lot. But for him to praise him, but say, hey, wait a second, still got to work this and this. Like you said, keep him on the straight. Don't get your head too big yet, like rookie, right? So it's kind of like, but at the end of the day, I think you can be a big part of this defense.
Aren't you harder on your kids that you expect more from?
Right?
Yeah. The ones that you think can accomplish more.
Exactly.
You're a little bit harder on them, right?
100%.
So I got one here from the 12 Talk podcast. So Josh and Mitch there.
Hey, guys.
And this is what they kind of say. They think it's going to be Jarrell over Stone from Josh. So he doesn't see Stone making this roster.
It could be. Stone is a guy that, 4-year veteran. He could get through waivers.
He could.
Like,
very
as a guy
well.
that has just shown he doesn't, his ceiling's maxed out. He is what he is.
Yeah.
There isn't more in the tank there. He's had some good reps and bad reps. We're going to see a lot of teams release tackles over the next couple of days that they've just given up on after a couple of years. Jackson Carman's a good example. This is a guy coming out of Clemson a couple of years ago that I remember a bunch of us liked in the draft that year. There were needs at tackle, and he just hasn't panned out, but he's still just 25 years old. He gets cut already. I think guys like Forsyth are valuable, but they're sort of a dime a dozen, right? The Brandon Shells of the world, where they can start if you need them to, but you're not going to you go out of your way to make a spot for him.
Yeah.
Maybe that's ultimately
Forsyth,
the decision.
Honestly, is the drop off from him to Roquan O'Neal enough for you to be like, no, we have to have Forsyth on the roster?
Yeah.
Because Roquan O'Neal, I believe, gets through to the practice squad fairly easily.
Yeah.
And the drop off there, it is. Stone's probably the better guy. But the difference is so small that the risk of losing Forsyth isn't that big of a deal.
That's a really good point, and I'll piggyback on it with this. Just because guys didn't get a bunch of reps and get a lot of attention during the preseason doesn't mean they don't like him. And another guy that popped into my head when you were talking about O'Neal is Garrett Greenfield. I know you mentioned him earlier, Bryce. He was a guy that I thought was one of their priority undrafted free agents. He was a guy I didn't know about until the combine, and then he blew me away. And he might be a guy that easily makes it to the practice squad, but a guy that they think that if they have to, if things really get bad at that position, that can come in and give you better reps for pennies on the dollar than a veteran like Forsyth can, that they don't have to worry about. So yeah, they might feel better about guys that we're not even talking about.
So the guy that I always get vibes of when I watch Forsyth is Tyler Columbus. Remember when he was here in Seattle?
Yeah.
He was like, you're serviceable. We can put you in, but you can play both tackle positions. And he'd give you a game or two where he was semi-decent. But if you played him more than that, he was going to get exposed and became a problem. And that's kind of what happened last year if you look at Stone Forsyth. The first couple games he played, him and Jake Curran were okay. Like, Curran was worse out of the two. The more Forsyth played throughout the year, the more he got exposed and was like, oh gosh, like, this guy's really not ready to play anything more than a game or two. So if that's the case, that's where, like what Keith's saying about Roquan O'Neal, that's where even Mike Jarrell, to me, like, if Mike Jarrell shows you enough in the first 4 weeks of some development and skill set, like, that's more to bank on long term. If he's going to get to hey, we can play him for a game or two and he's going to be okay, and Ryan Grubb can scheme things to kind of protect him a little bit, I'd rather have a guy that I'm going to get 4 years out of, and potentially right now he's near the ceiling of what Forsyth is, or close enough that I know he might get past it and be better off in the future.
Let me ask you guys this. Chris Clough chimed in again with a really cool comment about Mike Macdonald. He says, when we were talking about his comments about Tyrese Knight and Byron Murphy, and how with some guys he's a little more hesitant to overtly praise them. He says, I think Mike Mack is like that with a lot of guys. He's a perfectionist, which is what makes him such a good coach. There it is. Always asking for more. We haven't talked much about Macdonald. Now that we've seen an entire preseason here, seen a bunch of press conferences, we've seen how he reacts to games and how he deals with the press. How are we feeling about Mike Macdonald? What do you guys think about him just ingratiating himself and settling into that role as head coach?
I think I've been incredibly pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised because I kind of expected it, but I've thought he's checked every box. I mean, his ability to come in and just his attention to detail during camp, and his there was a culture change that needed to shift, where practices were tighter and more detail oriented and all of that. And he did that. And he's done it in a way where the players can't stop talking about all the positive things he does and how much they like coaching for him and how much he's making them better. Everyone loved Pete, right? For the most part, like, especially during camp when he tries to make things fun and energetic and whatever. And for them to have a guy who's not like that, that's gonna be harder on you, and still have everyone be like, no, this guy's awesome. Like, to me, that shows a lot about what he's doing. I've been really impressed with everything McDonald's done so far.
Yeah, and I think the big thing about, like you said, Pete and having a good time in practice, I think when Mike comes in, obviously he's got to prove himself a little bit, but I think when players are buying in and they can see this guy's about winning, like you said, the attention to detail is what really stood out to me too. And just listen to the press conferences, and there's always room to get better. And it's not like these blank statements that we sort of were getting used to hearing from Pete, like, we're gonna do really good next week just because we are. It's like he's got a lot of reasoning behind it. It just feels like this guy is just dialed in on every little aspect of coaching. And I think the players are. How can you not see that if you're a player down there with them every single day? So I agree. He's checked all the boxes. I think he, like I said, when Bryce and I have been talking about him the last few pods, like, he looks the part. Like, it feels like he's comfortable. It feels like he's been doing it for 5 or 10 years, even though, he's a young guy. He doesn't look old, but he just looks like he doesn't look like this rookie head coach down there.
The moment's never been too big for him. He seems so comfortable in it. And it's been maybe my favorite part of this entire preseason and off season is watching him grow into the role and embrace it and get comfortable with it. It's like he's born to do this. And it's such a cool approach. And, I hope at some point I stop even comparing the two, but it's kind of inevitable right now. And it will be until we actually start playing games. All the love for Pete Carroll in the world, but sometimes the messaging just gets stale.
Yeah.
And also sometimes the messaging stops working. Things evolve, the game evolves, schemes evolve, players and kids evolve. These kids are coming in more sophisticated now into the league than ever before because they're getting paid now. It's not the culture shock. It's not a big shock to their system to be pros now anymore. They've been pros for the last 3 or 4 years. And so I think a more detail-oriented, business-oriented, teaching-oriented approach is the way to go. And I'm so captivated and fascinated listening to him. I feel like I get smarter every time I hear him talk. I feel like he's laser focused. Like, this is what he was born to do. And there's a little bit of Belichick in him, in that this is just the focus, right? And he's learned how to deal with the press really comfortably already, even though that's something he didn't do a lot of. The things the players say, they take him seriously, but they also like him. I think that's important. And then we just know that his technical acumen and how much he knows about the game. I think we got a good one, and I can't wait. And I hope it translates. When you think about some of the young coaches that have been hired over the last 5 or 6 years that had all the hype and didn't work out, right? I always think of Brandon Staley. and he might be really smart, and he might be able to wow you on a whiteboard and with his film breakdowns and his X's and O's. But behind the podium, he was a disaster. He won his hiring press conference, and then I don't know what happened after that. Maybe he had a teleprompter that first day, but he couldn't handle the changes that happen and the little adjustments you have to make every single day. And I can't wait to see what this team does on the field, because he's just I think we got a good one. I really do.
Well, remember when we were talking about, do you go offensive head coach, defensive head coach, and then it's like, it's so much more than that, though, right? It's like you said, the Staley example is a good one where, he might be great at that aspect, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a leader of 53 men, when to lead them out there. And that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest takeaway. To me, it's like, we know this guy is this young genius on the defensive side of the football. That's great. And it's a huge aspect of why you wanted to bring this guy in for an interview, but there's so much more to him. And I think that, like, we're not even right now in this last few minutes, we haven't even discussed, his defensive schemes. We're talking about Mike Macdonald as the man, as the head coach, the leader of this team. And that's what players are going to see more than anything. Yeah, great. You got these schemes are awesome and we're excited. But at the end of the day, if that message isn't coming across, if this guy's not respected, that like you said, that's when things become a disaster, like a Staley. And then people are like, what were they thinking hiring this guy? You know what I mean? Because, oh, great, he can cook up some schemes, but okay, great, that you might be a good coordinator. But we've seen it how many times where that doesn't translate all the time to head coach. Seen it a million times. But with Mike,
it's another good example. Really good coordinator, just seemed uncomfortable in that role.
Yeah. And I think with
The
Mike,
skill
we're
set
just
for
all
a
confident.
coordinator.
Right.
Is this the skill set for a coordinator and the skill set for a head coach? There's not as much overlap as people want there to be.
Agree.
Now, players are going to look at a guy that's never been a coordinator, never done anything, and they're going to be like, "Who are you?" And they're not going to listen. So that's why you get the hires from that group of people. But it's a different skill set. Being good at one doesn't mean you're going to be good at the other. And I think that's kind of missed on a lot of these hires. Like, Staley's like that one. Like, yeah, he's really smart and he can design a defense and he can do those things, but he never did well out in front of people. He didn't represent himself, competently some of the time, and guys are going to take notice of that and they're going to start to tune you out. McDonald hasn't had that problem at all. Right. He's looked very much in control of every situation. He's just been really impressive. And the fact, like I said, the players keep talking about him in such positive ways, about the way he runs meetings and all of that kind of stuff. It just goes to show you that he's got this team right now.
I'll even go so far as to say this, because one of my biggest concerns, you talked, Ryan, about the concerns early on in the hiring process about, do we go offense or defense? And one of the biggest worries is, if you go with the defensive coach, you hire a really good offensive coordinator, what's going to happen, right? He's going to get a head coaching job. And we're all very excited about Ryan Grubb. And talk about a guy that I feel like I get smarter every time I listen to him talk. I could hear that guy, listen to him talk about offense for hours. If we've already seen some hints of this, if he has a great year, we might not even get to keep him for 2 years, right? Yeah. Like, that guy could go on to be a head coach in the near future. I'm not worried anymore about that happening, because I'm so confident in Mike McDonald's organizational vision and ability to be organized and and forge connections and evaluate. He will find another guy, and maybe he's already on the roster, and that's Jake Peets, right? But he will find a guy that fits his vision and continue and carry that torch. I don't worry about that anymore.
So this is my kind of little bit on the coaching side of Mike McDonald is, you got to look at what tree he came out of. And John Schneider's talked about this, how he wanted to be the Baltimore Ravens and what Ozzie Newsome did there and all that. Who didn't Mike McDonald learn from at every aspect of his coaching career at the professional level and even to the high-end college? The Harbaugh family, Jim and John. And they don't just take on anybody to be coaches with them. And you look especially at John and what he's done in Baltimore. He is a long-tenured head coach, but you never look at John Harbaugh and go, oh, yeah, the message in Baltimore's clearly gotten stale. They're not playing for him anymore. They're not doing like he has adapted. They took Lamar Jackson. And the thing that always stands out with me and John Harbaugh is when they were in Seattle, and it was Earl Thomas's first game back in Seattle with the Ravens. And it was 4th and goal. And Lamar Jackson comes over to the sideline and says, we're going for it. And John Harbaugh goes, yep, you know what? I trust you. We're going for it. And we're going to go. You never really saw that kind of stuff with Pete. Like Pete wanted to be so much more in control of it. And when it came to the LOB defense, yeah, he let it go a little bit because they could do special things because there was such elite Hall of Fame talent on that defense that they could make adjustments on the fly amongst them. But just the command, and that was one thing I was watching last night on with the sideline, and like, how does the sideline look to a Pete Carroll sideline? Like, everything looked composed. It didn't matter that they just gave up a huge shot play. Everything was composed. Mike McDonald didn't freak out. You didn't see him jumping up. It was just walk, okay, cool, look at my sheet, talk to whoever, and boom. And, you know, the other thing I was going to say, too, with Mike McDonald, you can already see it kind of paying off. And I talked on the 12 Talk podcast earlier today about this, is you look at the Titans game. He didn't call the defense at any point in that game. The first half was Andre Durde. The second half was Carl Scott. And there was one thing that stood out to me like crazy. And I've watched that game 4 or 5 times now. You could see that Andre Durde has bought into Mike McDonald's style of defense. They pressured. They did all that stuff in the first half. You could see Carl Scott's side come out, and they were off. They were playing off kind of like in Pete Carroll, and guys were running open. Like you look at that final couple of drives there for the Titans when they moved the ball. Yeah. It was like, well, I was watching, like guys were catching the ball and no one was around them. But the first half, that wasn't the case. And I know there were 3s and 4s and so on, but you could see the stylistical change of calling a game at that point, and maybe why he went out and picked Andre Durde to be his defensive coordinator. It was like, hey, this is a guy that shares that same vision as me. And Carl Scott is the only holdover from the Pete Carroll era at all.
Yeah.
So, no, I think they got the right guy with Mike McDonald. And I think and the other guy that I don't think gets talked about enough is Leslie Frazier. I think he has had such an impact on Mike McDonald and this organizational vision, how to handle things, how to handle the press, what to do, what not to say, how to handle the guys. I think Leslie Frazier is invaluable to the Seahawks franchise with Mike McDonald here. And it looks very similar to what the Rams did when they got McVay. They brought in Wade Phillips. Mm-hmm. Here's your veteran head coach that's done it before. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. This is how we're going to go forward. So there's an interesting question here, though. I'm going to throw it up from, again, 12 Talk. So this is a good one. What are your opinions of the safety position? Are Jenkins and Wallace the answer going forward, or is Mike looking for a better pairing? Is Bryant going to be the answer?
Well, I think if Jenkins is healthy, it's Jenkins and Love, and Wallace is your third guy that's going to play a lot of nickel. And that's why, you know, this gets into the discussion that we had earlier about Burns versus James and how much is Witherspoon going to play inside. I think Wallace is going to play that spot a lot when Jenkins is healthy. But we haven't seen a whole lot of those 3 guys on the field at the same time. So I don't know yet. You know, I just don't know yet. I'm not sure. I did want to mention this, though. I think that's such a great point you make about McDonald's lineage and his history, because isn't John Harbaugh the best example of kind of what I was talking about earlier? Like, that dude was a special teams coach. I don't even know if today he could get on a whiteboard and draw up defensive schemes for you or offensive schemes. But what he's done from day one and what has made him such a good head coach is communication with players, teaching, and his organizational ability, right? His ability to manage a staff, to manage the managers, and get the most out of players that way, and keep the message fresh, and evaluate and understand hiring good coaches. I think that, you know, it's McDonald, I think, is one of those rare guys that just is the whole package. He has all.
Yeah, I will say this too. I've thought the same thing when, you know, we've been in the offseason talking about Mike Mag and just how confident we are with him, and the whole thing about, oh shoot, if you go defensive head coach, you're gonna lose your OC quicker than if you went the other way around. But okay, if you hope this offense balls out, Ryan Grubb, if he gets a head coaching job in a couple of years, 2-3 years, whatever it is, I am 100% agreeing with you. it starts with Mike, and you're 100% confident that he's going to go get another good guy. Because, like, look at what he did when he came over here. He didn't bring a whole coaching staff of Baltimore Ravens, right? So he went out and recruited this guy, Ryan Grubb. He saw something in him that he says that this guy can work with this team. And so that's exactly what you want. And you look at, not to harp back on Pete, but his track record hasn't been great with the coordinators that he continuously would bring in, right? And so
He didn't develop any head coaches. I mean, after
right, and
Dan
that's
Quinn
not a good thing.
Yeah, Dan Quinn and Gus Bradley.
Yeah,
and that was it. Although, I mean, you have to give him credit for Dave Canales, and actually, I wasn't that high on him as a candidate, but it looks like, gosh, the early signs at Carolina are pretty promising. But in 15 years, 3 guys that doesn't bode really, really well. I suspect that McDonald's going to be one of those guys that, if he's here 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there's a coaching tree, and guys are going to go on and become head coaches.
Yeah. And Bryce, real quick, to your point, when I was listening to your point about, I think you were saying how composed he is in the sideline, and that's a great thing. I'm gonna give him a little time to see if anything happens throughout the year. But the one guy you talk about, the tree, Jim, he's been known to freak out a few times on the sideline and still be successful. So it's just kind of how you go about it. Everyone's got their own brand. I do like the calm and cool demeanor that Mike poses, and not too high, not too low. So, but you know what? It's just finishing up touching on Mike too. I just and who knows how we'll do, but you just feel like you got your guy now in this division going when you play the Niners, when you play the Rams. McVay against McDonald, Shanahan against McDonald. That gets me excited there when we're gonna play these divisional games.
Yeah.
So
looks like we've lost Keith, guys, but I have.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no, actually, Keith had to leave. Probably missed. So yeah, guys. Anyway,
we've got a solution.
Shout out to Keith Myers for coming in and joining us on this live pod. We always love having Keith on from the Seahawks Playbook. So guys, if you've been listening in on this live stream and you haven't went over to those guys' channels yet, go over to the Seahawks Playbook and give them a sub. Because they do awesome work.
Thank you for reminding me. I wanted to say that too, because I'm also live streaming this on my channels, and so a bunch of my viewers are here. If you guys haven't gone over to Bryce and Ryan's podcast yet, the Hawkszone Rundown, get your ass over there and give them a subscription. They're closing in on 1,000 subscriptions. That's a big deal in the YouTube world. You get to 1,000, and it just really helps elevate your channel. So if you haven't done it yet, get the hell over there and subscribe to these guys.
Yeah, appreciate that, Jen.
Look at
We're
Josh.
Bringing in Josh from 12 Talk Pod. What is up?
What the hell time is it there? What is it, midnight?
Guys, by the way, Josh is on the other side of the pond, so we have no idea what time it is over there.
It's super late. It's 25 past 12. I've just
Oh, he's been up for 24 straight hours.
Yeah, it's been a long time for me. I've been tuned into this. You guys have had an amazing conversation right now. It's like, obviously, I've just been typing away, like asking questions. It's been so good. We had Bryce on our live podcast earlier, and it was awesome.
Kudos again to you for the tool that you guys have provided for that. I texted you directly, and I know you sent me that link a long time ago, and I never played around with it. Now I'm kicking myself. That thing is a beaut.
So good. Like the German Seahawkers have done so much stuff. Like I know for the US fans, I think it gets a bit scary when it's the German Seahawkers, but you can just translate it. Google Translate works so well. And these guys are amazing. I met 2 of them. I met Jonas, who was a guest on our pod, and Pascal as well last night in London. There was a few beers had, and it was just a great time. And those guys know ball so much. It was a great time. And what they put out into the sort of Seahawks sphere, this like the roster builder has been brilliant.
Isn't the German Seahawkers? Isn't it the top 3 biggest Seahawkers groups in the world? Right? Like
as a UK Seahawker, it pains me to say this, but they are the biggest Seahawks chapter outside of the US.
I remember hearing that when they played that game there. Yeah, that's cool.
They are so passionate. It's amazing, and the guys are so cool as well.
Well, it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been, like I said, sat here waiting, typing comments and questions. I know Bryce has got. You've just had one of the questions that I put up there about the safety position. And we've had this conversation, Bryce, with Kobe Bryant, where I don't think he's got, and I've said this for a long time, he has not got the natural speed to be a elite corner.
No.
But I think with the size he's put on, with the cognitive ability he's got, I think he's a fantastic safety option, whether it be free or strong, or what I think is going to be this really movable feast.
Yeah,
it's going to be, you can play free, strong. You've got to be a safety that can cover everything.
I mean, Kayvon Wallace is on a 1-year deal. I could see Brian, if he really, really takes to the position this year, that he could just slide into that spot next year. It'd be the last year of his rookie deal next year, I think. And yeah, I could see him being part of that kind of 3-headed monster moving forward. Or even if Rayshon Jenkins should have trouble staying healthy or maybe not play as well, he's on a 2-year deal. You know, you've got some cap issues next year. I think Kobe Bryant fits into this thing longer term.
I think the biggest domino to fall in that room is when Jarek Reed gets healthy. Where does he fit?
Yeah.
Because he is so fast and comes out of like thin air, just boom, he's there and in the spot. Like you look at what he did on specials last year. I just honestly think he's going to be that domino where I think next year's safety room is you drop out Jenkins. I think they move on. And you put Jarek Reed, and it's Reed, Bryant, Wallace, and Love, I think, going forward.
Yeah.
I think Kayvon Wallace, because of how young he is, really fits the Mike McDonald system of what he wants. Like, he's going to be your thunder hit guy. That's kind of what he's been so far, and I think that's what he's best suited at, is kind of playing closer to that line and maybe being more in the run fits and letting Julian Love play kind of that over the top a little bit when they go to those looks. And that's where I think Jarek Reed's kind of, once that domino falls, I think it'll be interesting. I'll be right back, guys, so you guys keep this conversation going.
I was just going to say this, and I'd be interested to get your guys' thoughts on like, what are you most looking forward to now in the regular season? Because I think one thing that's been sort of a recurring storyline or an undercurrent to this whole preseason is how tight McDonald and how protective he's been of not unveiling too much. I don't think we've ever seen as vanilla of an approach on both sides of the ball, really, in the preseason for a while than we have this year. Like even in the third preseason game, when we've seen some other teams, I've seen some clips of other games, and I've watched a few highlight packages and stuff, some of these preseason games, and you see teams, you know, playing around with some of their blitz packages and moving guys around. Nope, we're rushing 4 every time. We're playing 2 deep and sometimes cover 3 every time. On offense, a little bit different. You know, we saw some aggressiveness from Ryan Grubb yesterday, but not in a playbook sense, more so in just, you know, approach, right? Trying to get the ball down the field. I can't wait to see him unleash all of that against the Broncos in week 1. I think he's held back more than Pete Carroll ever did. And I think it's going to be really, really hard for Sean Payton to game plan against what we have in store. And it makes this exercise we were doing today about trying to put a roster together difficult, because we really don't know how he's going to use guys, right? Like, is he going to count Mike Morris as an edge guy? We saw him spying the quarterback yesterday, for crying out loud.
He's played middle linebacker as well.
290 pounds. Yeah. We don't know. I can't wait to see it all unleashed. You know, it's going to be fun.
I can't either. I think on defense, it's way more of a, you know, you have no idea what he's going to unleash. I think offense, like you said, Grubb just kind of put on display, hey, here's our 2 top receivers, and, you know, good luck trying to stop them. Here's a corner by JSN, and then one-on-one, good luck, right? So, man, I love defense, but I'm so excited. Like, Dan, you know, I've talked about, obviously, I love DK Metcalf, and I just think he's going to have a huge year this season. And I just think they're going to hit him early and often. And but it's going to be a nice mix, right? And you know, we've talked about Kenny Mack, and obviously your 2 running backs that haven't, even
We
see any
yeah.
preseason. But I just think I'm really excited to see, like, obviously Mike McDonald as a whole, and it's been so vanilla on defense, but just that offense, like, just because that's going to be completely different too. But
And
again, you
even there,
almost have the same personnel, and we've
yeah.
talked about that. You're rolling out. How many times do you see a team almost roll the same guys back, but you have a completely different, like, outlook of what they can be? I mean, to me, that doesn't happen too often.
But even on offense, we've seen such a small percentage of the run game playbook.
Oh, for sure.
He hasn't shown us anything there. He hasn't shown us any 2 or 3 tight end looks, because I think there's a purpose to that. I think he really wanted to get those reps from the offensive line, wanted to find out who could hold the edges on an island, right? He'll help those guys. If McClellan Curtis has to play at right tackle, or Fant is struggling, he'll help those guys. We didn't see any of that, right? And we didn't see, you mentioned it at the very top of the show, like, what's this offense? We saw a glimpse of what it could look like with DK Metcalf and JSN and Geno pushing the ball down to him. Okay, now let's add Tyler Lockett into that mix and have him running, hitting soft spots and middle of the field and doing what he does in running routes. It's going to be a very, very difficult team for other teams to prepare for and defend.
Okay, go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, we said it on our pod earlier. I think it's all going to be now, like, so from what Ryan was saying about the same personnel, but it's all down to coaching now. So previously we didn't have the coaching that necessitated people just excelling at what they do best. I think now we've got a coaching team who actually look at players and go, you do this really well, let's enhance that. That was never the case, especially with Waldron. Waldron just could not scheme up anything. Pardon you, Bryce.
Sorry.
That's that tequila beer.
Did you ease into the whiskey now at this point?
Just a little bit. I got into it a little bit.
Good lad.
That's why I love this.
That's right. It's okay. I'm on the IPAs.
There you go. Hey, Ryan, I just sent you a message, but Chris put another comment in there that I think is really an interesting point too, kind of talking about how they've really held back this preseason. Where he says they also played around with a very light front four. Yeah, one defensive tackle, all their edge rushers. I mean, like I said earlier, Miles Adams playing defensive tackle. Like, they've held back so much. They gave us a glimpse, just enough for us to see that, hey, we have something to look forward to here. But, we saw very little of Jonathan Hankins. We really saw very little Byron Murphy. I bet in a vacuum, McDonald probably would have loved to have played Murphy a ton. And in the old days, we would have. But the preseason has changed so much. I kind of hate it. I mean, I had a good time last night. Got to hang out with Bryce, but also it was one of the most entertaining preseason games we've seen in a long time. I think because of the newfound intensity and
with points scored.
And there were big plays. But I also find myself watching preseason games like this now. Just don't get hurt. Just don't get hurt. I have come full circle now. I think they should just get rid of the whole damn thing, like college football, and just have joint practices or whatever you want to do, and then just head into the regular season. But beside my point, like, they have shown us so little. We have not seen the full game plan with full personnel on the field yet, and yet we still have so much that we're 2 hours into talking about all the things we like about what we've seen so far, and yet he's shown us, like, it's iceberg, right? It's the 10% tip of the iceberg on the top of the water, and we haven't even seen what's underneath yet.
I would love to address this point. I've literally just been raised here. So the whole, like, not playing starters, it's preseason. You could play in the regular season and people still get injured. It doesn't matter. It's a contact sport. It doesn't matter when people play or who you're playing against. There's always a possibility of injury. So you can play first string, second string, third string. You could play against a UFL team. Someone could get injured. I completely appreciate what people are saying, but, like, as a sports coach, as an ex-player of a contact sport, it doesn't matter who you play. There's going to be injuries, and I understand trying to protect people, keeping in that protective bubble of not playing them. But if you do that, they're not ready for the season, in my opinion. You need to play a contact active game to have someone ready to play in the regular season. Because if you're playing against your teammates, your friends in practice, that's cool, but you're not going to hit them in the face. You're not going to try and embarrass them with a dot from, say, someone like Gino. But the injuries are going to happen regardless, whether it's the first game, the 17th game, the playoffs, it's going to happen. So in my opinion, it should be a matter of just trying to ease them in, get everyone used to that contact, because as Bryce will probably tell you, as a coach as well, if you don't train contact, your body is not conditioned to it. So these guys need to be in there. They need to be playing against people that will hit them full frontal in the face. If you don't play them, then you come into the regular season, you'll get hit once and your body's not used to it. Yeah. So you'll always have those injuries. It's a huge, like, sliding scale. It's a massive contradiction in itself, but you want to protect them, but you need to play them.
It's tough because, like, when you look at, like, just pull the Aaron Rodgers example, like, gets what first series or whatever. But if
on the first drive, wasn't it?
I mean, but what do people say? That happens, right? But if it would have happened in a preseason game, the Jets would have got roasted and killed.
Yeah.
The fact that they had their starter out there and he blew his Achilles, and they'd be like, why is he there? He does not need to be there. And that's not to say, to your point, that that it wouldn't have still happened, because it did. But at least it's more, I think, to the average fan and the front office, that it's a little more acceptable, because, like you said, injuries are part of the game. That if it happens in the regular season, we can accept it a little more, because these games, and I agree, because listen, I'm not a big betting dude, but I wouldn't gamble on the first week of the season, because, to your point, everyone's not fired on all cylinders. It takes a few weeks to get dialed in, and a big reason is because you don't play. But I just think we're at this point that, like you said, Dan, you're holding your breath. When Chenna with the sprain, you're holding your breath, and then if he went out for the year, you'd be like, man, why did we play that guy? He was injured last year. Like, just sit him. Like, let him come in week 1. He's been practicing. We're good. And I'm sort of in that boat. Like, Josh, I get your point, but I'm also think we're at this point. The money's so big. These guys are like DK. He showed us, hey, we know DK can go run a fade route and an out route, but you just saw the coaching on display more than anything. We know DK can do that. So take your helmet off, hit the shower after that. We're good.
I got something to ask you guys. How do you feel about heading into the regular season, about how the early part of the schedule looks? Because I'm just looking at, like, preseason results today, and I'd forgotten that there's a Sunday night game tonight, and it's New England against Washington, and the Patriots still haven't decided on their starting quarterback. It's been assumed all the way through it was going to be Jacoby Brissett. Mm-hmm. He hasn't been that good this preseason. Drake May seems to be gaining ground. He's going to play tonight. That could be fun. And then
Washington for the win.
Are we sure that, but I'm being ridiculous here. I'll just preface this by saying that this is hyperbolic, because preseason is preseason. But are we sure that the Broncos made the right decision for week 1 at quarterback? Because Zach Wilson today for the Broncos against Arizona, they blew him out. 38-12 was final score. Zach Wilson, 16 out of 25, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 124 passer rating. Sean Payton can coach.
I had a funny thing.
And there are some pieces there in Denver. Are we that sure that week 1 is going to be as soft a landing as we had all hoped?
So I was going to throw this curveball out to everyone just to see what everyone's actual reaction would be. It might get the chat to blow up, and I might become the most hated person. We talked earlier about a third quarterback.
Join my club.
Oh boy.
And I saw that, and I went,
keep 3?
Are they going to keep all 3 and risk a roster spot? Or are they going to cut Zach Wilson? Because you've heard Sean Payton talk at length about Jarrett Stidham and how much he loves Jarrett Stidham. Would they trade or cut Zach Wilson? And is he a guy that, if Ryan Grubb and them got their hands on him and put him in, a situation, because he's burnt a lot of bridges and charred a lot of stuff. It's a hypothetical situation, but how would you feel if Zach Wilson was your third quarterback here in Seattle?
Oh, I think it'd be fun. He'd be a practice squad guy, and I think it'd be, we talked about head coaches earlier, that it's there, that the skill set's there, the knowledge is there, but maybe they can't handle some of the other parts. Like Zach Wilson hasn't handled all of that, the non-football part of the thing all that well. I think he's a little immature, and he's one of those guys that just didn't have a lot of playing experience. It's basically 1 year of college, at full-time reps. But the talent's there, and I'm always take a shot on a guy that can just rip it, and spin it, and has arm talent, and has some ability to move around. And while there are questions about his processing, there's also plenty of reps that show that he's got some upside there. So, you're the quarterback guy, Bryce. Like, if you tell me that you think Zach Wilson still has starter upside in this league, then hell yeah, I'm doing something like that. I'd much rather find a guy like that a team gives up on, that's available out there, than a guy like PJ Walker. PJ Walker is a placeholder. He's a camp arm, and he's nothing more than
UFL. It's a UFL QB.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what he is. But the thing is, I would say I think Sam Howell's a better developmental prospect going forward than Zach Wilson. Yes, he's got a big arm, Zach Wilson's, and we saw it last night. Apparently, Sam Howell's got a bazooka attached to his right arm there, where that spot is. That ball he threw down the sideline to Cody White just was unreal. Okay, this is a good one. I wouldn't mind from Sean or Shane. I'm sorry, I'm not sure which way it's pronounced, but I wouldn't mind one of the likely QBs Cleveland may cut, DTR or Huntley. I think DTR is safe.
DTR.
I think he's safe.
DTR's making the roster. But Huntley played in Baltimore. Like, Mike McDonald knows him firsthand.
Wasn't Huntley always also in Green Bay as well?
Did he spend some time? Was that Brett Hundley?
Oh, Brett Hundley.
Brett Hundley was the one we had here.
Yeah, right.
Tyler Huntley was the one in Baltimore.
He's from Utah, University of Utah, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going through our lads right now and looking at depth charts, and I'm like, just kind of scrolling through team by team, and I'm like, Bailey Zappi's going to get cut. I know he doesn't have a strong arm, and so maybe that's a non-starter for a guy like Ryan Grubb. But I'm just kind of scrolling through teams like Keaton Slovis got cut by the Colts today. I know he doesn't have a real big arm, but he had a great preseason. He was like 80% completions. Like, there's dudes that are going to be available that are better than PJ Walker.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. I wanted to bring this up. I was going to bring it up with Keith, but we have Josh here now too. So, what are we expecting out of the Seahawks this season, guys? Like, win totals. It's time for win totals. We are done preseason. Dan, you want to go first?
I said 2 or 3 weeks ago that it feels like an 11-win team. And that was even before we've seen everything we've seen to this point. And that was just based on the quality of the roster that I thought, the young talent spread throughout the roster, and what I was seeing from this coaching staff, seeing and hearing from this coaching staff. That, forget about the schedule. People like to look at the schedule and they like to try and go game by game and pick it. But it's almost impossible to do that and detach yourself from preconceived notions or recency bias of what you think teams were. We don't know until you get on the field. I feel like this staff and this roster, that there are games we wouldn't have won over the last 7-8 years that they will now win. They will find a way. They will be more adaptable within a game. They will go into each week with a better game plan tailored towards that team, instead of just, we're going to run what we run and try to execute it as best we can. I think they're going to be more creative. I think they're going to teach better. Execution's going to be better. And we're going to win some games that I think when we get into the season, there are going to be shows we do. We're going to talk to each other and we're going to go, I don't think we win that game last year or the year before. And then you look around the division and it's not great right now. I know the Cardinals are feeling good about themselves because they're the new darling, but even Darius Robinson's going to be out for a significant amount of time now. Their defense has major question marks. I've never been a Kyler Murray guy. And even if he is healthy this year and he plays like he did the last half of last season, it was more as kind of a game manager, sort of a point guard type
Don't
guy.
say that. I've just drafted him in fantasy.
Right. I mean, hey, being a good fantasy quarterback doesn't necessarily mean you're a good quarterback, right? I just mean he's not a guy that scares me as I'm preparing for him with the Seahawks. You look at the Niners and all the things they're dealing with, and not set the contract stuff aside. Like their entire defensive line outside of Nick Bosa is banged up. All the guys they brought in this year to make up for some of the free agent losses are banged up. They've got injuries. They've got Greenlaw's out and Hufanga's out. And their offensive line is in tatters right now. Brock Purdy hasn't played well in the preseason. The Rams, as much as I thought what they did on the offensive line in the offseason was going to set them up to be a really dynamic offense, they got nothing but injury issues up front there. Now the Ernest Jones thing. They've named Stetson Bennett as their backup quarterback now, to a guy who is proven that he has some injury issues. If Matt Stafford goes down, do you fear facing the Rams with Stetson Bennett at quarterback? Like suddenly this division doesn't look as daunting. And I just feel really good about this staff. And I know it's easy to feel good right now, but I think there's enough evidence to warrant it.
So go on, give us a number.
I think they win 11. I do.
Okay.
I do.
Nice. Yeah, I like it.
I think they think they're going to win 11.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah,
I think they're going to find a way to do it.
I think they're really confident going into this season. I think they might even think they're going to win more. But yeah, I like that number a lot. Bryce, what are you thinking?
So I looked at it this way. When we first started this offseason, going through the hiring process and everything, I thought, okay, if Pete's back, we're going to win 9. That's our cap. That's what it is right now. Maybe we squeak one more game if somehow it goes right. But I was thinking we were 9 wins max. I think there's a good chance this team could get to 12.
Ooh,
I think they could go 12 and 5, because now that I've seen some of this product on the field, how they play, how this scheme starting to show up, I look at before when I looked at the schedule and went, ooh, Miami, I don't know if we can beat Miami because of their high-powered offense. I think we could beat Miami and blow them out of the water, theoretically, where we shut down their high-flying offense because Tua's under pressure and he can't get the ball deep to Tyreek Hill. And our offense is too much for their defense to handle. Like, that's the thing that I came out of that preseason game with going, this is probably one of the very few years I've looked at a Seahawks team where they're not even a completely finished product, but they complement each side of the ball so well, where we have a defense that could be suffocating and dominant and at the same time end up, having a situation where they have a rough week and our offense goes off. Like, we're not in a situation where, like, when the Legion of Boom used to fail or struggle, our offense struggled to gain, even with Russell in his prime, gain some traction and win some of those games unless they were against a really weak opponent. I feel like now we're in a situation where it's like, yeah, you know what? If we have a day where our defense has a bad day, our offense could still put up 37 points if they needed to and play in that kind of a shootout situation.
Josh.
I'm exactly the same as Dan. I think it's going to be 11-6 season. I think it's going to be.
Is that metric or standard wins?
That's right. Bully the Brit. It's fine. I think there's like you said. I think the division is San Francisco. The 49ers are a McCaffrey injury away from having not a lot, because we've seen Debo in preseason. He's not offered much to them. Brock Purdy's looks awful in preseason. The Cardinals are still trying to build. The Rams somehow seem to be steady, even though Stafford's neck is held on by a shoestring. Looking at the whole schedule, I think 11-6 is very realistic. I'd, depending on what day I feel, I think 10-7, 11-6. The optimist in me thinks 11-6, but I sort of move between the two. I think it's all going to depend on that mid-season point where our defense actually starts really clicking and knowing what to do and where they need to go. If we do that by game 6, game 7, let's say, I think that's where we slide to the 11 win. If we don't get the Mike Mack defense down properly, I think it's going to be a 10-9 win. But I genuinely think with the coaches we've got, with the players we've got who know how to play football essentially and what they need to do. So you Rayshard Jenkins, if he comes in fully fit by game 3 or 4, I think we'll definitely be 11-win team. So I'm going 11-6. Yeah. I put it on our pod, like the way too early predictions a while ago, and I'm going to stick with it. 11-6. There you go.
Nice. Yeah. Well, Chris Clough chiming in. He thinks it's a tough schedule for 11 wins. I mean, number 12 toughest schedule based on 2023. Need O-line. I mean, that's gonna be a big question mark for sure. Yeah. I mean, the one thing about the schedule, I guess the one thing people look at, we don't have that gauntlet, quote unquote, like last year that was like, whoa. Yeah. So I think when you look at this schedule, you kind of look like, do we have a gauntlet? No. Okay, we're pretty good. I mean, he's right though. There's going to be a lot of tough games, a lot of tough matchups, and you got to play the Rams and Niners. I know we're saying they're not, don't look as good. Purdy doesn't look good, all this kind of stuff. But what do we love so much about this squad this year? Mike Mack. What do those teams have? Really good head coaches. We also thought the Rams weren't going to be any good last year, and then they made the playoffs, and then you're like, yeah, Sean McVay still knows what he's doing, and. I just think and that's part of the schedule, Rams and Niners, until those guys really part ways from those teams. I think you're always going to look at somewhat competitive teams, maybe not Super Bowl contending like the Niners will be every season, but they have proven to be great coaches. And I think we now feel like we potentially could have our own version of that. And now people could potentially look at the Seahawks like that for some years to come, and that's what I'm hoping. I mean, I'm in agreement with you guys. I got them around 11, and I just, a lot of it is talent based, and now that with these coaches, we're confident that they could put them in the best positions to succeed. Carroll was able to pull 9 wins out of these guys, and at times it looked like a disaster. They couldn't stop the run to save their life. The offense was, even though on paper they looked okay, it was super stale. Still won 9 games, almost made the playoffs. So I think when you look at that, if you believe in this coaching staff and you think Mike's going to take that next step, and obviously a foundational year, but still they're obviously proven that they want to compete. So I agree. I'm around that. If things are, I'm around that 11. I think we could do that. It's going to be tough, but I think it's doable.
I love that Bryce is like biting his nails and like holding his lip.
Oh no, I just have a surprise for everybody in about probably a minute here. So
okay, go.
We'll see here. So just hold on a minute here.
And just guys, heads up, I'm going to be exiting soon here on the live stream. But I think that sort of segues into his surprise.
Yeah, my surprise is coming here, guys, for everybody. So we've got another guest that's actually going to quickly join us here to kind of help out with the 4 squares we've got going here. But guys, the one thing I'll say about this Seahawks team is I don't have as many, kind of like when I look at our divisional games against the Cardinals and the Rams and the Niners, I used to dread them. Now I'm excited for them again, where I'm actually like, yeah, I can't wait to take on the Niners. I can't wait to take on the Rams. I'm not going, oh, God, this is going to be a problem. And there's my surprise for everybody. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Chris Clough, guys.
Hey, guys. What's up, buddy?
I've been lurking and just listening to you guys. So
lurking in the comments.
Nice to meet you, Josh.
Yeah, we figured.
Yeah, you too.
We figured we better just get you on here.
Yeah, you've been asking the best questions basically in the group, the most detailed ones. So we figured, why not throw Chris on here so we can answer some more of our guest ones as well when he come on.
Well, Chris, no, it's awesome you coming on here, guys. Just for everyone watching the show, Chris Clough's been on the show with us a few times, and he's awesome to have on the show. So it's awesome that you could join us and keep this conversation rolling along here.
I think it's fitting. If I remember correctly, I think Chris, it was you that put us all together. You reached out to me and said, "Hey, I got these guys that I know that are doing this really cool thing in Canada, and they'd love it." And you put us together in the first place, and now we've done a whole bunch of content together. So yeah.
I mean, Bryce and Ryan are really,
Oh, I think Chris has got. There you go.
But you guys have taken off. You guys have had so many people on your show. I see all the different people coming on, and obviously Dan is.
But I'll even say this too.
He's saying some really good stuff right now.
Yeah, I'll even say this too. Back when I first started podcasting, like 5-6 years ago, Chris was the first first name guest that I ever had on one of my podcasts, and so that's kind of how it all started for me too. So
it's awesome having him on. We've had we've had him on about 3 times, and it's just, I mean, I always look forward to it because it's always a great discussion. I mean, obviously super insightful. So
I think he's just reconnecting, guys. He just left out, but he's going to reconnect here. So
guys, I'm about to hop out of here, but keep it rolling. And
all right, buddy.
There's conversations to be had. Don't you worry.
Good to see you, Ryan.
Chris, coming on. Good to see you, Dan. Josh, thanks for coming in. And we're going to be obviously tuning in hard when the Hawks make it official here with their 53 man. So,
hey, Ryan, do you want to make the announcement before you go? Because it feels right that you be here for that announcement.
Sure. I mean, just to let people know, Bryce and I obviously been, working hard behind the scenes, and we're gonna be dropping some Hawkszone merch coming up soon. We're gonna hope the goal is before week 1, just for the season, but we'll see. It could vary a little bit, but we'll have the link on our YouTube channel and all those details to come. So
it'll add to your collection of hats, Josh. We have hats.
Oh, am I gonna have to pay double the amount to get a hat sent to me in the UK?
It'd be expensive shipping. Yeah, no, we're just kidding. But so just look out for that. But guys, keep this rolling. And that was a fun conversation today.
I do. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Man.
All right, guys.
See you, Ryan. And Chris came back. There we
go. He's back.
Yeah, sorry. He joined us. Yes.
Now we're back to the 4. Quad box. We got quad box going.
Yeah, we're quad boxing. We're just slowly rotating the box.
I got knocked off just as Dan was saying all the nice things.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit of a Wi-Fi thing sometimes. I think with StreamYard it struggles. But I'm going to throw a couple more questions, guys, that have been started out that haven't got answered, and some from earlier on. So Italian Knight asked this: do you think there's going to be any more trades before the final cuts?
Who wants to go first?
I'd say that at least one, because I think it's such a competitive roster on the back end that there is some value. I think we have extra picks for next year. I think we're at 9 right now as it stands after the Barrett trade. I think, as to Chris's point earlier in one of his comments, the biggest need on this roster right now might be another interior defensive lineman. Those guys are hard to find. You're going to have to, you can't just sit back and wait on the waiver wire if you want a good one. Brady Henderson keeps bringing up the possibility of a guy like John Ridgway. That's going to require a trade. You're going to have to beat someone else to the punch there. And so I think we see at least one as a way to acquire something that they feel like we need before week 1.
I think there might also be a rotational offensive outside linebacker.
Yeah,
I think now DT's gone. I really, really like who we've got there, but I think there might be one more rotational, because as much as Sheriff has really shone over this preseason, I think there might be one more there, because I'm not sure Sheriff's going to be the guy.
And really, Josh? Really? After did I ruin him?
No, don't. You swayed my opinion. I was all in on Sheriff for my pod, and then all of a sudden,
what's Levi Bell doing right now? What's Levi Bell up to?
Oh gosh, Levi Bell. And who was the other guy from years ago?
Isn't Jamie Sheriff the new Levi Bell? Right?
I think he might be. But who was the guy that we had? He was out of Oregon. What in the world was his name?
Nick Reed was a preseason legend.
Yes, that's exactly.
He's a 5'9" and 215 pounds playing outside linebacker. And
Yeah,
Nick
that's
Reed. He's one of
exactly
the.
who I had the vibes of.
Anytime we have these discussions about preseason flashes, like Nick Reed is always. Obviously, there's Casey Williams, who we've already talked about, but Nick Reed's the guy that pops for me.
Yeah,
It's the preseason and sort of training camp stars, and this was where I really got a bee in my bonnet about the whole McLennan Curtis and everything like that, because I was like, they seem amazing in camp, but then put them in a live game situation, nothing comes. I think Stone, and it's always was very much kind of. Yeah, like it doesn't take much for fans to think a guy can play in the preseason, right? He comes in the fourth. I swear to God, maybe you guys saw this too. Was it last week that Joshua Dobbs had a really good game for the 49ers and Brock Purdy astronaut? And I swear to God, yeah, there were multiple tweets of people saying, see, Purdy's not that good. Maybe this guy should be the starter. Like people get so just irrational with the preseason.
I know.
You have to take it all.
Dan, think about it. People did the same thing with Howell. The minute they heard in training camp this year that Howell was, horrible and he was missing targets, everyone was like, okay, cool, he's a bust. We need to move on. Like, we should have drafted somebody. Right. It's like, you guys, and we had Brandon Kane on, and me and him kind of got into a really good conversation about the quarterback position. You got to give these guys a chance to actually develop and learn the system that they're in. Like, Sam Howell's coming out of going on to his third offensive system in 3 years. And look where his first 2 years were. It's not like he was with Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, who understand how to develop quarterbacks. He was in Washington. Name me the last relevant Washington quarterback besides Alex Smith that really took off and was great for years. RG3 got hurt, fell apart. Kirk Cousins was there. He threw the ball up, but he got his next paychecks.
Mark Rippon.
There you go. Mark Rippon's about it. So, when you really look at that, you just Canadian, by the way, Canadian Mark Rippon, just going to throw that out there.
And Coug. And WSU
Coug. There you go. But it's let these guys actually develop. Even Tom Brady talked about that on a recent show or podcast he was on, where he's like, guys need a year. He's like, I'm still in favor of taking the year of development. And you look at a guy like Jordan Love. Yes, you may hit and get a Patrick Mahomes. People forget Patrick Mahomes sat 1 year behind Alex Smith. He didn't play his rookie year. Jordan Love sat. Aaron Rodgers sat. Sitting is not a bad option. And there are guys that are later round picks that will develop into starters down the line. Brock Purdy and all these other guys. So you can't just be like, oh, I need to go out and find the next best thing. Like a CJ Stroud hit. Great. Anthony Richardson could be not worth the first top 5 pick in the draft type of guy. You're not totally set and sold. So I'm gonna throw another question up.
I'm a little concerned if I'm a Patriots fan right now. I'm a little concerned that it seems like it's trending towards May starting week 1. Milton. I don't want that in the big picture. I don't. I love Drake May's side and his skill set, but I don't think he's ready.
I think if you're going to be, and I hate discussing the Patriots because the majority of my friends here are Pats fans. Don't ask. But I think Milton offers you more explosion and a higher upside than Drake May. Drake May is a really safe bet, but I think someone like Milton, if you're going to rebuild that team, you need someone that can offer you these explosive plays with his legs, with his arm. And I don't think Drake May is. I wasn't really high on him coming out of the draft. Shoot me, I don't mind.
No,
he wasn't my guy.
People too. I didn't have such a high grade on Drake May. He may turn into being a serviceable, I should say, quarterback. But I don't know if he was worth the pick that he was taken at. And I think some teams stretched for that.
Him and Zach Wilson, I find very much. Out of college, they got drafted really high, but I don't see them producing a lot in the NFL. That's personal opinion, but
that's fair. I'm going to throw up another question here. Proud Liberal writes, lose a tight end and keep Young at receiver, problem solved. I wish it was that simple, but it's not.
They signed Pharaoh Brown for a very specific reason, and that's and that is a reason that they value, and that is his ability to be an extra offensive lineman and to be a devastating blocker, especially in the run game. And while AJ Barnett has shown some of that upside, we talked about how young he is. Brady Russell's shown he's capable of being a blocker, but he's a much smaller guy than Brown. Of the guys on this roster that I think have zero fear of losing a roster spot, I think Pharaoh Brown, they went out and got him early in free agency for a reason. For a reason.
And I think that,
And as we talked about earlier, I don't think Derek Young gets claimed. Like I just think, or if he does, maybe he gets released again 6 weeks later. I like Derek Young's skill set and his upside, but if they cut him and decide to move on from him, someone else claims him, I'm not losing a second of sleep.
I've said this for a long time. I think Derek Young is DK Metcalf from Wish.
That's a good way of looking at it.
He offers very much the same skill set, although we've used him as a H-back. We've used him in various different positions.
Yeah.
I like him, but not enough for him to garner a spot in the 53. I think he offers special teams. He offers that backup wide receiver role. I think he can play that H-back blocking role as well, but I don't think he's got that point of difference. Where he needs to be on that 53. I think Brown is safe, but I think Barner is the next one up, because they play very much the same. But I think Barner's got better hands. I think Barner can actually move himself into space. He's got a better receiving sort of game as well.
Barner for me is kind of interesting because the comp that I kind of look at Barner is he's almost like if you took some of the skill set that made Will Dissly, and some of the physical traits that made Colby Parkinson. He's kind of, if you smash those two together, he's your tall guy that can run down the seam if needed. He's young, but he's the inline blocker type that made Will Dissly so good was his blocking ability.
Sometimes perception can get screwed up so easily. And our old, friend of your show, friend of my show, Curtis Allen of the blog, you guys just had him on recently. So good with talking about the salary cap, but he went to just about every public practice this year and was tweeting out observations. And one day he talked about how it looked like AJ Barner was running in quicksand or in slow motion compared to the rest of the tight ends. And I can't get past that now. Like, I love AJ. I love the pick at the time. I still think has really good upside and his blocking ability is unquestioned. But now I'm like, every time I watch him run a pass pattern, I'm like, is he going slow?
So slow.
No, it's ruined it for me. Thanks, Curtis.
He was one of so Mitch from our pod. He's picked two guys in the last two drafts. He picked Mike Morris, the previous draft, and this draft he pegged AJ Barner to be a Seahawks tight end, and I was like, I'm not sure, but okay. And then when I watched him play, I thought his blocking ability fantastic. It opens up the run game. He has got the receiving ability, but like you said, he's not the quickest tight end. But I don't think that's what he's going to earn his money for. I think he's going to have that Pharaoh Brown pure blocking. Every now and again, you'll get the surprise.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, he's made a reception for 20 yards. But I know what you mean, where it's like you see him running anywhere and you think, is that in slow motion? Has my TV slowed down a little bit? I've got a lag. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, his upside is he's your tight end too, long term.
Yeah.
Like, he's your guy he's your inline. He's your first choice to like be a devastating blocker when you go two tight end sets, and he'll help you in the pass game once in a while. But he's not a guy that you're going to feature with a lot of dynamic route running. Yeah.
No, he's the Devin Culp of the Washington Huskies. Like, in a year or two, that's what he is. Josh, you can laugh all you want, but the parallels are there between how they've constructed this and how they fit in. Devin Culp had a role with Washington last year where he was really their inline blocker. Kind of, that's what his role was. And Jack Westover was more of their route runner in a way. He was more the receiving threat out of that, the two of them. That's how I look at kind of what they did with Barner. They got one piece. Now they need to get their upgraded version of a Jack Westover or whatever for their team going forward. So here's one that I think Dan will speak to. That's another one of our few that have been asked. If Nwosu is in IR, should we try to acquire Haason Reddick?
So this gives me a chance to kind of clarify something. We did a show Monday I had Michael Thompson on from 12th Man Rising, and he'd been talking to me for a couple of weeks about this idea. The Jets traded for Reddick from the Eagles, but they weren't willing to hand him a new big contract coming off 4 years where he averaged 12.5 sacks a year. And so he's been holding out. It's a unique situation. We don't see this very often. Usually when a team trades for a guy, they know they can come to an agreement with him. It's all kind of done in advance most of the time. And so, he's a 30-year-old guy who's a dynamic pass rusher. And we talked about the idea of doing this. But at the time, one of the big selling points of this is, according to overthecap.com, his cap hit this year in the final year of his deal was only $750,000 because he had 3 void years tacked onto the end of his deal. Well, it turns out, and Corbin Smith gave some clarity to this a couple of days ago, his cap hit is actually $14.2 or $14.3 million. That Over the Cap's doing some back end kind of reconfiguring on their website, and there's some errors. That changes the game for me. There's no way you can fit him under the cap today. And it doesn't make sense, given some of their cap issues in future years, that you're going to sign him to a big deal when you already have 2 outside linebackers, if you count Draymond Jones as one of them, signed to big deals. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't see it as a possibility. I do think there's a chance there's someone else out there that we're not thinking about. That's a proven pass rusher, but that a team deems expendable, or they might want to save a little cap money, and there may be a surprise in that area. I tend to think if they sign an edge guy because they're looking for an upgrade over someone like Jamie Sheriff, and they want to hedge that and give themselves some depth and more rotational pieces, with Nwosu being out, I think it's going to be a younger guy with a bunch of upside and traits that just didn't have a chance to impress or make his current roster, which would just be a waiver claim at that point.
Do you not think, when you look at our outside linebacker core, if we were to sign someone like, say theoretically we have the money to sign Reddick, he might be a game changer, but that would hinder our young pass rushers' development so much for the future. Personally, as a coach, I'd like to have your Marthays, your Halls. If Nwosu's out, I'd have those 2 starting just to build for the future, because we've got 2 years left of Marthay before he's got to sign another contract. We've got another 3 of Hall. I would rather have them build from there, especially with our interior D-line now, where it's going to cause so much pressure. I'd rather have those 2 on the outside and not spend so much money on some 30-year-old pass rusher who may be proven, in inverted commas.
Yeah. And I trust this staff to mix and match. I trust this staff to be able to figure out a way to get by until Nwosu's back. Mike McDonald proved it in Baltimore. He picked up Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney off the street late last year before training camp and made that work at essentially the outside linebacker spot. People keep forgetting that, we mentioned it early in this live stream, but Mike Morris can play some of those responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And he did sound, we talked earlier about, trying to read between his lines and pick up on what he's saying about guys. He sounded pretty confident yesterday when he was asked about Draymond Jones that he's going to be good to go week 1. And so I think they were just ultra careful with him, held him out, but I think they expect him to be ready week 1. So I'm not worried about it until we have to worry about it.
Yeah, the thing for me with the Haason Reddick, people thinking about him as an option, Haason Reddick doesn't play the run well. What did Darrell Taylor struggle with? Playing the run well. Like, realistically, he did.
Yep.
Yeah,
they want guys that are versatile, and Dan, you can attest to this too, being at the game. They walk up and they look like they're going to bring 8 guys, and then 4 drop off, and they do a different kind of stunt with their 4-man line, and they still create pressure. Yeah. I think that's what you're going to see with Mike McDonald. That's his calling card. It's not to truly blitz or rely on a true pass rusher. it's simulate, it's cause confusion, and it's guys get free because there's a breakdown on the O-line's blocking assignment. And that's how Jaron Reed got his sack last night that he had on Jameis Winston. And so, speaking of this, I think they're better off, again, with Hall, Mafe, Jones, Morris, and that group, and mixing and matching and creating matchup issues for people to truly actually have, advantages in pressure that way. So here's another one, actually. Just throw this up here from Little Billy. I trust Mike to be able to adapt and address issues when the team is struggling. It will at some point. I had completely lost trust in Pete's ability to do that. I completely agree with that statement. Same. Like, I completely lost that as well.
Yeah. It seemed like the last couple of years, especially last year, that he was grasping for answers. We would hear him on his Monday coaches show after a bad game talk about, well, we're looking at this, we're looking at that, we're going to try this, we're going to try that. I would expect, if and when, because it'll happen at some point, we reach a rough patch, or we lose a game we should have won, or there's a poor defensive performance. I think what we're going to see from Mike Macdonald, based on what we've heard so far, is we know what we're going to do, and it would involve that guy's not going to get as many reps anymore. That guy can't get it done. This is, not a package that we can use right now because we don't have the guys to get it done. Where it just seemed like Pete in the last couple of years was sort of grasping at straws, trying to find answers. I do think that's one of the things that gives me confidence. He's going to be able to figure out, with this roster and this group of talent, week in, week out, how to plan week to week, because it'll be different. It's going to be more Belichick-like, in that we're going to see different game plans from week to week that are going to be much more dramatic than we saw under Pete.
No, I totally agree with that. You're going to see more scheming. You're going to see the offense and defense. Like, you can tell with, Grubb, he's doing the same thing. Oh, here's one we'll put up. Here's another one from Drew Sports. Nice of you to join, bud. What do you expect
Welcome
from this
a 12 Talk Discord member as well?
Yep, exactly, for sure. What do you expect from this offense when we are ahead? Establish the run, slow the game down, or keep the foot on the gas? Based on how Grubb's played, it's going to be kind of a put the foot on the gas, but possession. We're going to do it, but we're going to, eat the clock on you in a way, but not all of a sudden take our foot off the gas like Pete Carroll was so known to doing. Hey, we're just going to play defense. You got to win the game in the fourth quarter. You listen to Mike Macdonald, it's like, no. If we get the lead, we're just going to jam it down your throat and keep going until we basically obliterate you.
It seems to be with Grubb, he's very much like, if they're down, put your foot on their throat and keep going. Just keep hammering down. He's designed this offense where he's going to utilize every single receiver, running back, to the best of their ability, as opposed to what we had last season, which was, this is our offense. If you can't play it, we're still going to play it. If you can't do it, let's see what happens anyway. I think Grubb has looked at every single player we've got on this offense and gone, that's your speciality, that's your speciality, that's yours. Let's roll with it and let's see. I genuinely think this season we're going to see games where we will, you were saying, like, we're going to be adaptable, where we're going to have a game where Ken Walker might go for 150 yards because Grubb's looked at that and gone, they cannot stop that run. Or you're going to have a game where DK may have 3 touchdowns, or JSN might have the exact same because he's gone, they cannot stop JSN in the slot. Let's keep going. They can't stop DK in the deep. Let's keep going there. And they're just going to keep firing the same way. Every single game is going to be so different because he's going to scheme up based on what's happening in real time. Yeah. As opposed to scripted plays. This is what we're doing every time. This is how we're going to run this offense. It's going to be moving the offensive game plan to the team, much the same as Mike Mack's going to do and Aiden Durde is going to do. Defensively, it's going to be what game we're playing, who we're playing, how are they moving around, how can we make the best of what we've got. I think it's going to be a really exciting season on both sides of the ball.
I agree with that. I don't think it necessarily means, though, that by keeping your foot on the gas, it's just going to continue to be bombs away. I think Ryan Grubb has a sneaky streak within him that we've seen sometime in his time at UW and even earlier in his career, calling plays where he wants to be physical and run the ball down your throat. But I think what we'll see is this. Let's say the Seahawks have a 3-score lead in the third quarter. He's going to try to run the football down your throat to eat the clock and milk the game away. But the second you adjust to that and you start stacking the box and you slow it down, okay, now we're going to go over the top. Now we're going to adjust to what you're doing and always keep the pressure on you and keep you on your heels. Whereas to a fault, sometimes there were way too many games during Pete Carroll's tenure where it was a 1-score game and he would try to shut it down like that. And even as teams proved they could stop it, they couldn't then make the next adjustment and continue to move the ball and get it down the field. There would be a closed-mindedness. I keep thinking about that New York Giants game a couple of years ago at home at the end of the year with Colt McCoy playing, where they were stacking the box and shutting down what we were doing in the short game, and we just refused to adjust to it. I don't think we're going to see that. I'm not saying there won't be, someone might be listening to that and think, oh, we're always going to find the answer. No, sometimes you just don't have it, or you don't play well, or the other team plays great and makes plays.
Or the other team's better than you. That's
because they're trying to. I tell my dad all the time. We always argue. How come he thinks the Seahawks should win every game? Always. But I'm like, the other team's trying to win too.
What a guy.
Yeah. And they have some good players, and they have a whole bunch of people whose careers depend on this game too. But no, I think that's what it'll look like. I think he'll try to be physical and run the football. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but I think part of the reason yesterday, at least maybe I want to think this, is they've been very limited in showing us part of that power run game because they don't want to put it on tape.
No, exactly. That I think the closest thing we've gotten to it, honestly, was McIntosh's run, where they pulled and kicked out and ran straight ahead. That's the closest we've gotten to it. So I think that's I think I agree with you, Dan, that they've kind of hid that away, because that is part of Ryan Grubb's repertoire. Is not just zone. He runs gap. Like they've done it at Washington and run gap with Dylan Johnson. Mm-hmm. The thing that I'll say that I think is going to be different with the Seahawks team too is, how often did you guys feel like, for example, when I think I want to say it was 2017, and Kirk Cousins in Washington came in here, and it was pouring rain, and Bobby Wagner had the hamstring injury, and Earl went after him after the game saying he shouldn't have played, and we lost to Washington. I think that was the game when that was actually the Rams game when they ran us. There was one that they ran us. Yeah, sorry, that was Bobby's injury.
42-7 or whatever, and Wagner was out there on one leg, and Earl.
And they obliterated us. But the Washington game, Kirk Cousins came in here and it poured rain. We always had a tendency with Pete to play down to the worst teams level rather than playing at what we should have. And we did that early on in the Legion of Boom era. Like, we'd play teams and we'd just steamroll because they couldn't move the ball on our defense. But the teams of the last 5 years, I always felt, crap, we're playing a shitty team. They're going to play down. This is going to be a lot closer than it needs to be. And it proved to be the case. I don't know if I feel that with Mike McDonald in this group, where it's going to be like, no, we're going to play down to, we don't. It's going to be like, no, full gas. We're going. Like, they either have to stop us or they're going to get run over by us. One of the two is going to happen.
This is what I mean by foot on throat. It's those games where we could win by a touchdown or 3 points, but if we know that we've got them, we just keep going, and that's what I want to see, because I think I was going to say this earlier, the end of the Pete Carroll era, and we've all said it, we loved Pete. He's an icon in Seattle. He's a fantastic coach, people love him, but he got so complacent and so steadfast in what he did. His game plan philosophy, everything just stayed the same, where it was like, we will hold out. Can you win a game in the first quarter, fourth quarter? Yeah. But I think Mike Mack is going to, and Ryan Grubb is going to find people in the first or second quarter, and they're going to just go. If they know they can put 14, 21 points on someone in the second quarter, they're going to do it.
Agreed.
I think that's what's the most exciting thing about this season. And with the Mike Mack defense as well, we may put 21 points on someone, let in 7, but previously that could be letting in 14, even more. I think it's just going to be just such an exciting season. I'm so pumped for this. I really am.
All right, guys, we're going to go for about another 10 minutes here. So anyone in the comments want to get their questions in and answered, we're going to go for about 10 more minutes, and then we're going to call it the end of this roundtable before the season. So, we got a question here. Oh, now they're popping in. All right. If I'll put this one up. Card crazed. Let's go. If the Seahawks make a trade before the 53-man roster announcement, what position would they trade for? Oh, damn, this is a really good question.
I think it's defensive tackle. I mean, maybe there's a chance. I don't know. I think I tend to think they're content to go into the season with the offensive line they have in place for now, and then figure it out later if Lucas just can't make it. I think they're focused on it. I think it's defensive tackle. Maybe there's a chance it's outside linebacker if they think Nwosu is going to be out for longer than they hope. But I think they're looking for an interior defensive guy.
Josh?
I'm going to ask Dan a question. Do you, when you say defensive tackle, are you thinking another nose tackle or?
I think that type of profile. Yeah. I think a guy that can back up Jonathan Hankins, who basically the Cam Young rule. I think he was going to play that spot and they were counting on him for it. We don't know what the heck's going on there with him, when we're going to see him back. But if he has to start the season on IR, or they think he is, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll be at practice tomorrow or Tuesday.
I'd love that because I was really high on Cam Young. I think he offers a lot in what Mike Mack wants from a D tackle. So because he's got so much pace, gas, wheels, whatever you want to call it. He's got that ability to be able to move back and move across the line. I think the nose tackle position will probably be the one that we might look at.
Yeah,
I think we're fine across the rest of the line, even though it might be really movable. I think you'll probably see sort of Leo moving into nose at some point, depending on the blitz packages we're going to run. But I think a true nose to back up Hankins, if Young isn't available, I agree with Dan there. I think we've got enough outside linebacker and sort of edge rush. I
think they're making a trade. If they're going to make one, I think it's going to be an offensive tackle. I really do. I think they can pick up a nose tackle or someone to fill that void potentially through this waiver claim period that's going to occur. I really do think they're going to try and pick up an offensive tackle just because, and it's something that John Schneider said. Who was the reporter that mentioned it? God, I can't remember right now. But basically, I think it might have been Albert Breer or Ian Rappaport. And I think I saw it on the Sound or something. And they were basically asking him, like, hey, how do you feel about the offensive line? Is it where you want it to be? And John gave one of his kind of one of those. And that's what signals to me. I think John's going to be aggressive and potentially go get a right tackle if he doesn't feel that Abe Lucas, is going to play a lot this year, or if he's one wrong step away from being on IR for the rest of the year. Like, I don't think they trust enough of that tackle depth to be like, if that's going to be our one kink in our armor, that if it like literally gets exposed, it completely unravels the entire offense. I don't think John Schneider's going to let that be the thing that occurs this year. So I think there's a good chance that they may make a trade for a right tackle.
I think it's also got to be the as Seahawks fans, we're desperately hoping that Abe comes back, but the way his injury's going and how quiet they are with everything about him, you genuinely can't promise that it's going to be there. So we all hope desperately, but realistically, who knows? So it might be a matter of, like you said, shoring it up. I think it might be DT, but I can definitely see like a right tackle.
Here's another one from Dave. He's like, I don't think it's my imagination that this year's defense tackles roughly 100 times better than last year's. Dave, I would say probably tackles better than the last 5 years with the Seahawks defenses. Like there's always somebody around the ball, and the guy goes down within 1 or 2 hits. Like he's either down right away, or it's 2 guys are taking him to the ground. Like that was one thing I noticed last night was how often like DJ James or one of the young guys is like around the ball. There's nobody there were a couple moments, but there's not a whole bunch of guys running by themselves for 15 yards. Like there were a few moments, but not as much. And like the minute the ball's in play, like there was one where Jameis Winston on the first drive took off running, and I watched Byron Murphy literally chase his ass to the sideline and was there with Artie Burns to push him out of bounds. And I'm like, that is a big man, but he was just moving.
He was shifting. Yeah. And I think the defensive line, depending on what we run, if we go 3-4, 4-3, bare front, where Mike Mack tends to run 7 at the line and then shift them, I think you're probably going to see a lot of the outside linebackers moving inside as well. This is where it's so difficult for anyone who's not inside the organization to see, where we don't know who's going where, who's going to play in what position. It's going to be intriguing for absolutely every 12 to see.
Yeah, and you think about week 1, right? And Nwosu being out and concerns about, depth at the edge and even at defensive tackle. And with what we know about Sean Payton and picturing the way that he ran that offense in New Orleans, the Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara and all those guys, it wasn't a power running game, right? And so Mike McDonald's answer to some of those guys being out week 1 might be they just play a ton of nickel and dime, right? And
I'd love dime packages for us.
We have an extra safety, and it's I'm not that worried about it because I think they'll have answers.
Yeah, that kind of answers this question right here about the injuries. Yes, they're not great, but if Chenna isn't done for the year, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm very tempted to do what I did on my pod the other week and just sort of hug my mic and go, it's a contact sport, injuries happen, but I'm not going to do it because it's your pod.
It is, and they do. You are correct.
It's a matter of, with Mike, I think there are enough players there that are movable pieces that injuries shouldn't matter. So even Kayvon Wallace, let's say. So if a linebacker goes down, Kayvon Wallace, the safety, can move into that middle linebacker position and still be serviceable. And that's where I genuinely see him shifting. That this whole defense is going to be everyone moving into different positions, having to learn multiple schemes, multiple positions, the lot. Whereas the D line, I think, like I said in sort of 2 minutes ago, I think you're gonna see outside linebackers, edge rushers moving inside, and everyone else moving outside. It's going to be just interesting. I think it's going to be watch and wait and see what happens. I predict in 2 years, maybe 3 years tops, we will have one of the top defenses in the NFL. That people like you said, Bryce, people are gonna steal stuff from us.
Yeah, I think that's about to happen on both offense and defense in a lot of ways with this new system. But one thing I'm going to note, it's kind of interesting. I've been kind of monitoring Twitter as the show's been going on. There hasn't been anything leaked about any cuts yet. Nothing. I haven't seen cuts, the Seahawks, which is kind of interesting. So I'm kind of,
the Rams have gotten more stuff out there. Later
tonight maybe. But guys, I really want to say thanks for coming on. It's been, 3 hours. We've been talking Hawks. Josh has been in and out of the comments section. I've been talking Hawks basically now for 5 hours, so it's been a lot. But I'm just going to go around. You guys can plug your stuff for where people can find you, what you guys got coming up in the next couple weeks here leading into week 1 of the regular season. So I'll start with you, Dan. What's going on the Seahawks Forever show?
We're heading into week 0, right? So obviously we'll be all over the next couple of days, cuts and any trades or any interesting acquisitions, and just trying to stay on top of that. And then practice squad, that's always fun to kind of watch that be filled out. We'll keep our eye on injury news, certainly. And then I've got a couple of guests, great local journalists who cover the team that I'll kind of keep under wraps for now that have agreed to come on the show during that period. So, just really trying to set the stage for what we think we're going to see in the regular season, and then get a little bit more specific and, after next week and just start to focus on the Denver Broncos. and get into the season and the routine of the season and previewing each game, try to have somebody on that covers the other team or does content creation for them each week, and then breaking it down afterwards, live reaction shows after the games, and trying to get into some film breakdowns as well. So that's what I've got coming on.
Josh, you guys down over there on the other side of the pond from us?
Yeah, so we're the 12 Talk podcast. We're a UK-based Seahawks podcast. We are by 12s, for 12s, with 12s. Our whole ethos for the whole season is to have as many 12s as possible come on and talk post-game, pre-game. We've got some amazing guests coming up. Obviously, we've had Dan on, and he was amazing. So
thank you, sir.
Do it again.
Got to get you on this way.
Yeah, yes. We've just had Bryce on, and it was an amazing pod. We've got some amazing content creators. We've got some 12s from all around the world that are going to come and review games with us. And it's going to be an amazing season for us as a newer Seahawks pod. We're so proud of what we're doing. We're now the official UK Seahawkers pod. Nice. And it's just we're growing. We're growing a community. We've got a Discord. We're all over social media. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's tuned in with this, tuned in with Ryan and Bryce. These guys do an amazing job. Dan, you're one of my favorite podcasters. You get me through my drives for work.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, sir.
Appreciate both you guys. And for those of you watching, because I'm also streaming this on my channel again, head over to the 12 Talk podcast and the Hawkszone Rundown podcast. Give those guys a subscription. They're great Seahawks and producing some great content. I got some breaking news, guys. As we mentioned earlier, the Commanders and Patriots are playing right now. Jacoby Brissett exited the game 2 minutes in after getting sacked. He's injured. No details yet on just how severe it is. Drake May is in the game now and leading a drive, and people are already saying that this may be kind of the final piece of information that we need to see that will lead the Patriots to naming May as the starter. So the Seahawks might be facing a real possibility of 2 rookie quarterbacks weeks 1 and 2.
Oh, I just saw the video of Brissett getting a hit there, Dan.
He got munched.
He got munched. I wouldn't be shocked if it's not a shoulder injury by the looks of that. But, again, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners that were tuned into this episode. Really appreciate the comments, guys. For the Hawkszone Rundown, we're going to be doing post and preview shows every week for the leading up to the season. And we're also going to have, Josh and Mitch on from the 12 Talk. We'll have Dan on. We love having Dan on throughout the season and do some collabs there. And, we've got a couple cool things coming up. Like Ryan alluded to, we've got merch that will be dropping week 1. So you guys will be able to order hats, T-shirts, hoodies. And
unless you're in the UK.
Yes. And we've got ultimate logos that we've designed for this. So it's not just going to be our OG logo. Dan's had the luxury of seeing what some of the logos look like. I'll make sure to send them over to you, Josh, as well, so you can kind of get a peek of what those look like. But thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. And I'll just end it out with Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Thanks, you guys.